It seems that something has happened with my model. A small technical difficulty. Hold on. There we go. a bit of a small, a bit of a small mishap. Nothing too bad. I think we've got it. I think we got it just fine. But let's let's bring back the gentle sounds that we had last time. Just a small mishap with the model. Don't you mind that? But hello, everyone. It's good to see you all. Hello, welcome on in and welcome back. A small a small mismanagement at the start of the stream, but that's nothing that we can't really be bothered to, try to get rid of. But hello everyone. It's good to see you. Welcome on in. Hello, Singhells. Hello, Full Auto Lock. Welcome in, and hello, Immersed Rhyme. And hello, Daedric. I'm Blanket. To those new here, welcome on in. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your Heavenly Harmony and the Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical subject goddess. Welcome on in. Welcome to our continuation of the story that we were reading yesterday. We were reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. We left off at, I believe, chapter 7. We're about to start 76 pages in. And yes, I am doing well. I was actually assisting in making sure that a critter was also having a nice time as well with their own first starting ASMR stream. Testing out the ropes. I wanted to make sure that the critter was doing good. So I'm glad that it's doing well. I'm very proud. I'm very proud for sure. Was just also editing a bit of was just posting the announcement to Twitter, and I am about to right now start up my stream on IRIAM, but I hope you're all doing well. Let us let us lock in, shall we? But I hope you're all doing well. Let us make sure that everything is good, everything is set up. And let us start, at least for IRIAM, because I want to make sure that also the folks over there are also aware of what's going on. I was meant to stream a little bit earlier, but unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I had some important things to discuss. And by important things, I had to discuss a couple of Elysian Tower business. After all, I am part of a streaming group, and we needed to make sure to get a couple of things, organized before I eventually could begin my stream. And this time I'm not forgetting to get my charger, so at least I am prepared in that aspect. I have water, I also have coffee here that unfortunately has gotten a bit cold, so I'll probably have to step away a bit later in order to, well, heat it up a little bit, so I at least have a bit of coffee for this stream. Alright, let's make sure that everything is good. And another thing, I was thinking of possibly getting the same ASMR engine that both Mira and a friend of mine, June, also got for their ASMR. So we might get some sound quality in the future that isn't just this sort of um, audio filter. You would actually get an actual ASMR like thing. Hi, Peach. Welcome in. It seems you've missed yesterday's stream. Yes, I did get a bit of a haircut, and we are currently going through some reading ASMR. We are right now making sure that I have everything that I need in order to start on IRIAM so that I could lock in and begin reading for you all. But yes, I did get a nice haircut. Do you like it? Do you think it looks nice? Hopefully it does. It does look nice. Let me get the mic just a little bit more closer, just so that everybody can hear me. And thank you for the follow, Cirque Night Natsu. Oh? Thank you so much for the follow and for reaching our goal. Oh, that is quite loud. That is quite loud. Oh, I'm so sorry. That is very, very loud. But thank you for the follow. I am turning that volume down to all to hell. Thank you very much, Peach. I appreciate you. I'm seeing a lot of new ASMR artists this month. True. There's plenty. I know that my friend Mayra online was doing an ASMR. My friend June right now, June Starius, is also doing an ASMR. And of course, I've recently started my own, so I'd like to think that it's all going pretty well. Although I don't have the ASMR engine system that they have, I would like to. There we go. I would like to say that. Well, I think I just followed them. Good. Very good. I'm very glad to hear that. They're a great critter. They're a very, very great critter and very good streamer. Don't let it deceive you. It's a good streamer. I'm on the prowl for ASMR artists. Well, I hope that you know that it might be technically my second time, considering that yesterday I began and it's my most recent. I will be uploading as well this stream to I will be uploading it as well to YouTube as yes, now I have added a YouTube VODs channel. So I will be adding it in the commands in stream elements and you will be able to access it at any time. Welcome to ASMR. Why thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let me make sure that stream elements as well is also good so that I can go ahead and grab everything that I need. Let me open up YouTube in another tab and let's find a way to get that up. I'll check it out soon. Thank you. It might not be fully edited, I will say. It will be directly Twitch bots directly into that channel itself. Oh my god, I already have one subscriber. Yay! Yippee! Alright. Let me go and grab the link right here. It'll be very simple. It'll be called Starry Muse.
Oh dear, mother. It appears your sultry, dulcet tones are putting Peach to sleep. It seems their departing is not to fall asleep in the middle of the afternoon. Fare thee well, Peach.
Fare thee well, Peach. I hope that you rest up and hopefully you don't fall too asleep. And if you don't want to fall asleep, then at least I hope the rest of the day treats you well. Thank you for stopping by and I appreciate you. Thank you for informing us, Dante. That is greatly appreciated. And thank you for the lurk. I truly appreciate you. Thank you very much. Now let's access stream elements and let's add that as a command so that everybody can also have it. There we go. And let's grab the link and make sure that everything is nice and ready and set to go. And there we go. let me make sure that I also have the information that Stream Elements likes to say, because sometimes it does say please support me, so I want to see where that could potentially be at. Timer. Here we go. And there we go. And now for every amount of time, everything should be good. And if I activate this, yep, there it is. Perfect. There we go. If you'd like to see the end of this stream on a bot exported directly to YouTube, please check out that link in the chat and you'll be able to see it directly if you've missed anything so far. Alright. Let's start ourselves on IRIAM. Make sure that everything is set. And let us begin properly this ASMR sesh. Unfortunately, starting up late, but at least we were able to make it. There we go. Hello, Phantom. Hello, Q. And hello, Eddie. Welcome on in. I hope you're all doing well. Hopefully, you're able to hear me from this distance, yeah? If I need to turn up the gain a little bit, please do let me know. Unfortunately, the distance between one mic and the other is a little bit far, if I might add. But I will do my best to increase my voice as high but low and gentle as I can. So please do let me know if you're able to properly see me. Or see and hear me, I would say. Let me give my support to the critter over here, and then I return. I am talking to everybody. It's fine at the moment? Okay, good. Taking our sip of water. And yes, Eddie, welcome on in. Taking our sip of water. And let's lock in at the moment, shall we? Alright. Do let me know if there's any interruptions or any sounds, or if the sound quality as well of the microphone is not super high as intended. If I need to increase the volume just a tad bit, please do let me know. Alright? On my return, I found the following letter from my. As I'm about to begin, oh goodness gracious. Welcome on in, these biscuits. Welcome on in. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your heavenly harmony and the Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical sultry goddess. Welcome on in. Welcome to the continuation of our first ASMR. We are currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Welcome on in. Your presence is greatly appreciated, and no worries here. Right? On my return, I found the following letter from my father. My dear Victor, you have probably waited impatiently for a letter to fix the date of your return to us, and I was at first tempted to write only a few lines, merely mentioning the day on which I should expect you. But that would be a cruel kindness, and I dared not to do it. What would be your surprise, my son, when you expected a happy and glad welcome, to behold, on the contrary, tears and wretchedness? And how, Victor, can I relate our misfortune? Hello, Snowy. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing good. We're just about to start the chapter. We're just starting it, actually. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing good. Absence cannot have rendered you callous to our joys and griefs, and how shall I inflict pain on my long absent son? I wish to prepare you for the woeful news, but I know it is impossible. Even now your eye skims over the page to seek the words which are to convey to you the horrible tidings. William is dead. That sweet child whose smiles delighted and warmed my heart, who was so gentle yet so gay. Victor, he is murdered. Hello, Doritos. Welcome on into stream for the first time. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your Heavenly Harmony, an Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. Welcome on in to our ASMR reading. We're reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. I might not fully pay attention to chat, but I would like to at least continue reading in the meantime. So I hope you sit back, enjoy the fire, and enjoy the reading, and welcome in. Correct, that is correct, the third Elysian boss. A pleasure to meet your acquaintance, and thank you for the follow. Welcome to the auditorium as you are now at Starlight. Welcome in. I will not attempt to console you, but will simply relate the circumstances of the transaction. Last Thursday, May 7th, I, my niece, and your two brothers went to walk in the Plain Palais. The evening was warm and serene, and we prolonged our walk farther than usual. It was already dusk before we thought of returning, and then we discovered that William and Ernest, who had gone on before, were not to be found. We accordingly rested on a seat until they should return. Presently Ernest came and inquired if we had seen his brother. He said that he had been playing with him, that William had run away to hide himself, that he vainly sought for him, and afterward waited for him a long time, but that he did not return. This account rather alarmed us, and we continued to search for him until night fell, when Elizabeth conjectured that he might have returned to the house. He was not there. He returned again with torches, for I could not rest, when I thought that my sweet boy had lost himself, and was exposed to all the damps and dews of night. Elizabeth also suffered extreme anguish. About 5 in the morning, I discovered my lovely boy, whom the night before I had seen blooming and active in health. Wretched, stretched on the grass, livid and motionless. The print of the murderer's finger on his neck. He was conveyed home, and the anguish that was visible in my countenance betrayed the secret to Elizabeth. She was very earnest to see the corpse. At first I attempted to prevent her, but she persisted, and entering the room where it lay, hastily examined the neck of the victim, and clasping her hands, exclaimed, "Oh God, I have murdered my darling child." She fainted, and was restored with extreme difficulty. When she again lived, it was only to weep and sigh. Hello, Blanket. Welcome in, and thank you for the star in the num. I appreciate you. Welcome in. She told me that the same evening William had teased her to let him wear a very vulnerable miniature that she possessed of your mother. His picture is gone, and it was doubtless the temptation which urged the murderer to the deed. We have no trace of him at present, although our exertions to discover him are unremitted, but they will not restore my beloved William. Come, dearest Victor. You alone can console Elizabeth. She weeps continually, and accuses herself unjustly as the cause of his death. Her words pierce my heart. We are all unhappy, but will not that be an additional motive for you, my son, to return and be our comforter? Your dear mother, Alas, Victor, I now say thank God she did not live to witness the cruel, miserable death of her youngest darling. Come, Victor, not brooding thoughts of vengeance against the assassin, but with feelings of peace and gentleness that will heal instead of festering the wounds of our minds. Enter the house of mourning, my friend, but with kindness and affection for those who love you, and not with hatred for your enemies. Your affectionate and afflicted father, Alphonse Frankenstein. Geneva, May 12, 17. Clerval, who had watched my countenance as I read this letter, was surprised to observe the despair that succeeded to the joy at first expressed on receiving news from my friends. I threw the letter on the table and covered my face with my hands. "My dear Frankenstein," exclaimed Henry when he perceived me weep with bitterness, "are you always to be unhappy? My dear friend, what has happened?" I motioned to him to take up the letter, while I walked up and down the room in the extremest agitation. Tears also gushed from the eyes of Clerval as he read the account of my misfortune. "Thank you for the head pats, Kieran. Welcome on in. And thank you for the Dante head pats. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well. Welcome in, welcome in. It's good to see you. I hope you're doing well." "I can offer you no consolation, my friend," said he. "Your disaster is irreparable. What do you intend to do?" "To go instantly to Geneva. Come with me, Henry, to order the horses." During our walk, Clerval endeavored to say a few words of consolation. He could only express his heartfelt sympathy. "Poor William," said he. "Dear lovely child, he now sleeps with his angel mother. Who that had seen him bright and joyous in his young beauty, but must weep over his untimely loss. To die so miserably, to feel the murderer's grasp. How much more a murderer that could destroy such radiant innocence. Poor little fellow. Only one consolation have we. His friends mourn and weep, but he is at rest. The pang is over, his suffering are at an end forever. A sod covers his gentle form, and he knows no pain. He can no longer be a subject to pity. We must reserve that for his miserable survivors." Tired as heck, but hope you're well. I am doing quite well. I am doing very well. Cold, but I am doing good. Clover spoke thus as we hurried through the streets. The words impressed themselves on my mind, and I remembered them afterward in solitude. But now, as soon as the horses arrived, I hurried into a cabriolet and bade farewell to my friend. My journey was very melancholy. At first, I wished to hurry on, for I longed to console and sympathize with my loved and sorrowing friends. But when I draw near my native town, I slackened my progress. I could hardly sustain the multitude of feelings that crowded into my mind. I passed through scenes familiar to my youth, but which I had not seen for nearly 6 years. How altered everything might be during that time! One sudden and desolating change had taken place, but 1,000 little circumstances might have by degrees worked other alterations, which not be the less decisive. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead of a line. Which, although they were done more tranquilly, might not be the less decisive. Fear overcame me. I dared not advance, dreading 1,000 nameless evils that made me tremble, although I was unable to define them. Welcome in, Mercagins. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for the Dante handpans. I hope you're doing quite well. Dante says hi to you as well. Welcome in. Welcome to our ASMR reading. We are reading some Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. I remained 2 days at Lausanne in this painful state of mind. I contemplated the lake. The waters were placid. All around was calm in the snowy mountains. The palaces of nature were not changed. By degrees, the calm and heavenly scene restored me, and I continued my journey toward Geneva. The Rhone ran by the side of the lake, which became narrower as I approached my native town. I discovered more distinctly the black sides of Jura and the bright summit of Mont Blanc. I wept like a child. Your mountains, my own beautiful lake, how do you welcome your wanderer? Your summits are clear, the sky, and lake are blue and placid. Is this to prognosticate peace, or to mock at my unhappiness? I fear, my friend, that I shall render myself tedious by dwelling on these preliminary circumstances. But they were days of comparative happiness, and I think of them with pleasure. Hello, Lucky. Welcome on in, and thank you for the star. I hope you're doing quite well. Welcome in. We're doing some reading. We are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Let me drink a bit of water and let my yawns come out slowly. Let me also lower the strength of my AC and try to at least put the blanket on myself. I don't want to be fully struggling of cold, I imagine. It is a nice, tranquil vibe, but I would like to not be shivering while I'm reading the book. I hope you're all doing well so far. This is my time. Your time. True! Blanket, now you can rest upon my shoulders. Rest upon my shoulders and give me the warmth that I desire. Thank you. There we go. Although my light is not off, I feel like I'll probably turn it off in like a couple of minutes. Let me at least get to 100 pages and then I will do the task of making sure that everything is set. There we go. Ah, there we go. A blanket has been laid upon my shoulders. Wear me as a blanket, use me to vanish, or confound enemies as a comfy net. I will make sure to remember that. All right. Let's return to our reading, shall we? My country, my beloved country. Who but a native can tell the delight I took in again beholding thy streams, thy mountains, and more than all, thy lovely lake? Yet, as I drew nearer home, grief and fear again overcame me. Night so closed around, and when I could hardly see the dark mountains, I felt still more gloomy. The picture appeared a vast and dim scene of evil, and I foresaw obscurely that I was destined to become the most wretched of human beings. Alas, I prophesied truly, and failed only in one single circumstance, that in all the misery I imagined and dreaded, I did not conceive the 100th part of the anguish I was destined to endure. It was completely dark when I arrived in the environs of Geneva. The gates of the town were already shut, and I was obliged to pass the night at Secaron, a village at the distance of half a league from the city. The sky was serene, and, as I was unable to rest, I resolved to visit the spot where my poor William had been murdered. As I could not pass through the town, Oh, sorry. During this short voyage, I saw the lightning playing on the summit of Mont Blanc in the most beautiful figures. The storm appeared to approach rapidly and, on landing, I ascended a low hill that I might observe its progress. It advanced. The heavens were clouded, and I soon felt the rain coming slowly in large drops, but its violence quickly increased. I left my seat and walked on, although the darkness and storm increased every minute, and the thunder burst with a terrific crash over my head. It was echoed from Salève, the Jura, and the Alps of Savoy. Vivid flashes of lightning dazzled my eyes, illuminating the lake, making it appear like a vast sheet of fire. Then, for an instant, everything seemed of a pitchy darkness, until the eye recovered itself for the preceding flash. The storm, as is often the case in Switzerland, appeared at once in various parts of the heavens. The most violent storms hung exactly north of the town, over that part of the lake which lies between the promontory and Belrive and the village of Copet. Another storm enlightened Jura with faint flashes, and another darkened and sometimes disclosed the mole, a peaked mountain to the east of the lake. While I watched the tempest, so beautiful yet terrific, I wandered on with a hasty step. This noble war in the sky elevated my spirits. I clasped my hands and exclaimed aloud, "William, my dear angel, this is thy funeral, this thy dirge." As I said these words, I perceived in the gloom a figure which stole from behind a clump of trees near me. I stood fixed, gazing intently. I could not be mistaken. A flash of lightning illuminated the object and discovered its shape plainly to me. Its gigantic stature, and the deformity of its aspect, more hideous than belongs to humanity, instantly informed me that it was the wretch, the filthy demon, to whom I had given life. What did he there? Could he be? I shuddered at the conception. The murderer of my brother? No sooner did the idea cross my imagination than I became convinced of its truth. My teeth shattered, and I was forced to lean against a tree for support. The figure passed me quickly, and I lost it in the gloom. Nothing in human shape could have destroyed that fair child. He was the murderer. I could not doubt it. The mere presence of the idea was an irresistible proof of the fact. I thought of pursuing the devil, but it would have been in vain, for another flash discovered him to be hanging among the rocks of the nearly perpendicular ascent of Mont Salève, a hill that bounds Plain Palais on the south. He soon reached the summit, and disappeared. I remained motionless. The thunder ceased, the rain still continued, and the scene was enveloped in an impenetrable darkness. I resolved in my mind the events which I had until now sought to forget. The whole train of my progress toward the creation, the appearance of the work of my own hands alive at my bedside, its departure. 2 years had now nearly elapsed since the night of which he received the life. And was this his first crime? At last, I had turned loose into the world, a deprived wretch whose delight was in carnage and misery. Had he not murdered my brother? No one can conceive the anguish I suffered during the remainder of the night, which I spent cold and wet in the open air. But I did not feel the inconvenience of the weather. My imagination was busy in scenes of evil and despair. I considered the being whom I had cast among mankind and endowed with the will and power to effect purposes of horror, such as the deed which he had now done, nearly in the light of my own vampire, my own spirit let loose from the grave, and was forced to destroy all that was dear to me. Day dawned, and I directed my steps toward the town. The gates were opened and hastened to my father's house. My first thought was to discover what I knew of the murderer and cause instant pursuit to be made. but I paused when I reflected on the story that I had to tell. A being whom I myself had formed and endowed with life had met me at midnight among the precipices of an inaccessible mountain. I remembered also the nervous fever with which I had been seized just at the time that I dated my creation, and which would give an air of delirium to a tale otherwise so utterly improbable. I well knew that if any other had communicated such a relation to me, I should have looked upon it as the ravings of insanity. Besides, the strange nature of the animal would elude all pursuit, even if I were so far credited as to persuade my relative to commence it. And then, of what use would be pursuit? Who could arrest a creature capable of scaling the overhanging sides of Mount Salif? These reflections determined me, and I resolved to remain silent. It was about 5 in the morning when I entered my father's house. I told the servants not to disturb the family, and I went into the library to await the usual hour of rising. 6 years had elapsed, passed as a dream, but for one indelible trace, and I stood in the same place where I had last embraced my father before my departure for Ingolstadt. Beloved and venerable parent, he still remained to me. I gazed on the picture of my mother, who stood over the mantelpiece. It was a historical subject, painted at my father's desire, and represented Caroline Buford in an agony of despair, kneeling by the coffin of her dead father. Her garb was rustic, and her cheek pale, but there was an air of dignity and beauty that hardly permitted the sentiment of pity. Below this picture was a miniature of William, and my tears flowed when I looked upon it. While I was thus engaged, Ernest entered. He had heard me arrive and hastened to welcome me. He expressed a sorrowful delight to see me. "Welcome, my dearest Victor," said he. "Ah, I wish you had come 3 months ago, and then you would have found us all joyous and delighted. You come to us now to share misery which nothing can alleviate. Yet your presence will, I hope, revive our father, who seems sinking under his misfortune, and your persuasions will induce poor Elizabeth to cease her vain and tormenting self-accusations. Poor William, he was our darling and our pride." "Hello, Akito. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well." "Yes, I am. I am currently reading Frankenstein from Mary Shelley. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for the star." "I appreciate you. Thank you." Tears, unrestrained, fell from my brother's eyes. "Oh, thank you for the hydrate, actually. It's good to hydrate in between. Make sure that everybody hydrates, alright?" Let me see how the critter is doing as well. Yippee! Good, good. I'm glad that the critter's doing well. A sense of mortal agony crept over my frame. Before, I had only imagined the wretchedness of my desolate home. The reality came on me as a new, and not a less terrible, disaster. I tried to calm Ernest. I inquired more minutely concerning my father, and her I named my cousin. "She, most of all," said Ernest, "requires consolation. She accused herself of having caused the death of my brother, and that made her very wretched. But since the murderer has been discovered—" "The murderer discovered? Good God! How can that be? Who could attempt to pursue him? It is impossible. One might as well try to overtake the winds, or confine a mountain stream with a straw. I saw him too. He was free last night." "I do not know what you mean," replied my brother, in accents of wonder. "But to us the discovery we have made completes our misery. No one would believe it at first, and even now Elizabeth would not be convinced, notwithstanding all the evidence. Indeed, who would credit that Justine Moritz, who was so amiable and fond of all the family, could suddenly become capable of so frightful, so appalling a crime. Oh, goodness gracious, Justine. Justine Moritz? Poor girl, is she the accused? But it is wrongfully, and everyone knows that. No one would believe it. Surely, Ernest? Hello, Haven. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well. Welcome in. We are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. No one did, at first, but several circumstances came out that have almost forced conviction upon us, and her own behavior has been so confused, and to add to the evidence of facts, a weight that, I fear, leaves no hope for doubt. But she will be tried today, and you will then hear all. He relates that, in the morning on which the murder of poor William had been discovered, Justine had been taken ill and confined to her bed for several days. During this interval, one of the servants, happening to examine the apparel she had worn on the night of the murder, had discovered in her pockets the picture of my mother, which had been judged to be the temptation of the murderer. The servants instantly showed it to one of the others, who, without saying a word to any of the family, went to a magistrate, and upon their disposition, Justine was apprehended. Hello, Noir. Welcome on into stream for the first time. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your Heavenly Harmony and the Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. Welcome in. We are currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing quite well. Welcome in. We have just discovered who the potential murderer of the main character, Victor Frankenstein's brother, could be. William Frankenstein. Thank you for the follow. Welcome to the auditorium as you are now with Starlight. On being charged with the fact, the poor girl confirmed the suspicion in a great measure by her extreme confusion of manner. This was a strange tale, but it did not shake my faith, and I replied earnestly, "You are all mistaken. I know the murderer. Justine, poor good Justine, is innocent." At that instant, my father entered. I saw unhappiness deeply impressed on his countenance, but he endeavored to welcome me cheerfully, and after we had exchanged our mournful greeting, would have introduced some other topic than that of our disaster, had not Ernest exclaimed, "Good God, Papa! Victor says that he knows who was the murderer of poor William." "We do also, unfortunately," replied my father, "for indeed I had rather have been forever ignorant than have discovered so much depravity and ingratitude in one I valued so highly." "My dear father, you are mistaken. Justine is innocent." "If she is, God forbid that she should suffer as guilty. She is to be tried today, and I sincerely hope, that she will be acquitted." This speech calmed me. Oh, good. Let me adjust myself in my chair because I seem to be slouching. Welcome in, Unearthed Quasar. Welcome in. We're currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. This speech calmed me. Let me try to adjust myself a little bit more easier. I apologize if there's some ruckus in between. Welcome in. I am doing quite well. I have been good. This speech calmed me. I was firmly convinced in my own mind that Justine, and indeed every human being, was guiltless of this murder. I had no fear, therefore, that any circumstantial evidence could be brought forward strong enough to convict her. My tale was not one to announce publicly. Its outstanding horror would be looked upon as madness by the vulgar. Did anyone indeed exist except I, the Creator, who would believe unless his senses convinced him in the existence of the living monument of presumption and rash ignorance which I had let alone loose upon the world? We were soon joined by Elizabeth. Time had altered her since I last beheld her. It had endowed her with loveliness surpassing the beauty of her childish years. There was the same candor, the same vivacity, but it was allied to an expression more full of sensibility and intellect. She welcomed me with the greatest affection. "Your arrival, my dear cousin," said she, "fills me with hope. You perhaps will find some means to justify my poor guiltless justice. Alas, who is safe as she is be convicted of crime? I rely on her innocence as certainly as I do upon my own. Our misfortune is doubtly hard to us. We have not only lost that lovely dear darling boy, but this poor girl, whom I sincerely love, is to be torn away by even a worse fate. But she will not. I am sure she will not. And then I shall be happy again, even after the sad death of my little William." "She is innocent, my Elizabeth," said I, "and that shall be proved. Fear nothing, but let your spirits be cheered by the assurance of her acquittal." "How kind and generous you are. Everyone else believes in her guilt, and that made me wretched, for I knew that it was impossible. And to see everyone else prejudiced in so deadly a manner rendered me hopeless and despairing." She wept. "Dearest niece," said my father, "dry your tears. If she is, as you believe, innocent, rely on the justice of our laws, and the activity with which I shall prevent the slightest shadow of partiality." Chapter 8. Capítulo 8. Page 89. We passed a few sad hours, until 11 o'clock, when the trial was to commence. My father and the rest of the family being obliged to attend as witnesses, I accompanied them to the court. During the whole of this wretched mockery of justice I suffered living torture. It was to be decided whether the result of my curiosity and lawless devices would cause the death of two of my fellow beings, one a smiling babe, full of innocence and joy, the other far more dreadfully murdered, with every aggravation of infamy that could make the murder memorable in horror. Justine was a girl of merit, and possessed qualities which promised to render her life happy. Now all was to be obliterated in an ignominious grave, and I the cause. 1,000 times rather would I have confessed myself guilty of the crime ascribed to Justine, but I was absent when it was committed, and such a declaration would have been considered as the ravings of a madman, and would not have exculpated her who suffered through me. The appearance of Justine was calm. She was dressed in mourning, and her countenance, always engaging, was rendered by the solemnity of her feelings exquisitely beautiful. Yet she appeared confident in innocence, and did not tremble, although gazed on and execrated by thousands, for all the kindness which her beauty might otherwise have excited was obliterated in the minds of the spectators by the imagination of the enormity she was supposed to have committed. She was tranquil, yet her tranquillity was evidently constrained, and as her confusion had before been adduced as a proof of her guilt, she worked up her mind to an appearance of courage. When she entered the court, she threw her eyes round it, and quickly discovered where we were seated. A tear seemed to dim her eye when she saw us, when she quickly, but she quickly recovered herself, and a look of sorrowful affection seemed to attest her utter guiltlessness. Poor girl. The trial began and, after the advocate against her had stated the charge, several witnesses were called. Several strange facts combined against her, which might have staggered anyone who had not such proof of her innocence as I had. She had been out the whole of the night on which the murder had been committed, and toward morning she had been perceived by a market woman not far from the spot where the body of the murdered child had been afterward found. The woman asked her what she did there, but she looked very strangely and only returned a confused and unintelligible answer. She returned to the house around 8 o'clock, and when one inquired what she had passed the night, she replied she had been looking for the child and demanded earnestly if anything had been heard concerning him. When shown the body, she fell into violent hysterics and kept to her bed for several days. The picture was then produced, which the servant had found in her pocket. And when Elizabeth, in a faltering voice, proved that it was the same witch, an hour before the child had been missed, she had placed round his neck, a murmur of horror and indignation filled the court. Justine was called on for her defense. As the trial had proceeded, her countenance had altered. Surprise, horror, and misery were strongly expressed. Sometimes she struggled with her tears, but when she was desired to plead, she collected her powers and spoke in an audible, although variable voice. Hello, Bacon. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well. We are continuing yesterday's readings. I hope you're doing well. God knows, she said, how entirely I am innocent, but I do not pretend that my protestations should acquit me. I rest my innocence on a plain and simple explanation of the facts which had been adduced against me, and I hope the character I have always borne will incline my judges to a favorable interpretation where any circumstance appears doubtful or suspicious. She then related that, by the permission of Elizabeth, she had passed the evening of the night on which the murder had been committed at the house of an aunt in Shen, a village situated at about a league from Geneva. On her return, at about 9 o'clock, she met a man who asked her if she had seen anything of the child who was lost. She was alarmed by this account and passed several hours in looking for him. When the gates of Geneva were shut, and she was forced to remain several hours of the night in a barn belonging to a cottage, being unwilling to call up the uninhabitants to whom she was well known. Most of the night she spent here watching. Toward morning she believed that she slept for a few minutes. Some steps disturbed her, and she awoke. It was dawn, and she quitted her asylum, that she might again endeavor to find my brother. If she had gone near the spot where his body lay, it was without her knowledge. That she had been bewildered when questioned by the market woman was not surprising, since she had passed a sleepless night, and the fate of poor William had yet uncertain. Hello, Sonic. Welcome on in, and thank you for the star. I hope you're doing well. We are continuing to read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Concerning the picture, she could give no account. I know, continued the unhappy victim, how heavily and fatally this one circumstance weighs against me, that I have no power of explaining it, and when I have expressed my utter ignorance, I am only left to conjecture concerning the probabilities by which I might have been placed in my pocket. But here also I am checked. I believe that I have no enemy on earth, and none surely would have been so wicked as to destroy me wantonly. Did the murderer place it there? I know of no opportunity afforded him for so doing. Or, if I had, why should he have stolen the jewel, to part with it again so soon? I commit my cause to the justice of my judges, yet I see no room for hope. I beg permission to have few witnesses examined concerning my character, and if their testimony shall not overweigh my supposed guilt, I must be condemned, although I would pledge my salvation on my innocence. Several witnesses were called who had known her for many years, and they spoke well of her, but fear and hatred of the crime of which they supposed her guilty rendered them timorous and unwilling to come forward. Elizabeth saw even at this last resource her excellent dispositions and irreproachable conduct about to fail the accused, when, though violently agitated, she desired permission to address the court. I am, said she, the cousin of the unhappy child who was murdered, or rather his sister, for I was educated by, and had lived with his parents ever since, and even long before his birth. It may therefore be judged indecent in me to come forward on this occasion. But when I see a fellow creature about to perish through the cowardice of her pretended friends, I wish to be allowed to speak, that I may say what I know of her character. I am well acquainted with the accused. I have lived in the same house with her, at one time for 5, and another for nearly 2 years. During all that period she appeared to me the most amiable and benevolent of human creatures. She nursed Madame Frankenstein, my aunt, in her last illness with the greatest affection and care, and afterward, attended her own mother during a tedious illness, in a manner that excited the admiration of all who knew her, after which she again lived in my uncle's house, where she was beloved by all the family. She was warmly attached to the child who is now dead, and acted toward him like a most affectionate mother. For my own part, I do not hesitate to say that, notwithstanding all the evidence produced against her, I believe and rely on her perfect innocence. She had no temptation for such an action, as to the bauble of which the chief proof rests. If she had earnestly desired it, I would have willingly given it to her. So much do I esteem and value her. Hello, Sharky. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for the star. Welcome in. A murmur of approbation followed Elizabeth's simple and powerful appeal, but it was excited by her generous interference, and not in favor of poor Justine, on whom the public indignation was turned with renewed violence, charging her with the blackest ingratitude. She herself wept as Elizabeth spoke, but she did not answer. My own agitation and anguish was extreme during the whole trial. I believed in her innocence. I knew it. Could the demon who had, I did not for a minute doubt, murdered my brother, also in this hellish sport, have betrayed the innocent to death and ignominy? I could not sustain the horror of my situation, and when I perceived that the popular voice, the countenance of the judges had already condemned my unhappy victim, I rushed out of the court in agony. The tortures of the accused did not equal mine. She was sustained by innocence, but the fangs of remorse tore my bosom. I would not forego their hold. Poor Justine, having to deal with a crime that she did not commit. I feel bad for Justine. Justice for Justine. My poor girl. My poor girl. I pass a night of unmingled wretchedness. I agree. Justice for Justine. Hashtag justice. In the morning I went to the court. My lips and throat were parched. I dared not ask the fatal question, but I was known, and the officer guessed the cause of my visit. The ballots had been thrown. They were all black, and Justine was condemned. I cannot pretend to describe what I then felt. I had before experienced sensations of horror, and I have endeavored to bestow upon them adequate expressions, but words cannot convey an idea of the heart-sickening despair that I then endured. The person to whom I addressed myself added that Justine had already confessed her guilt. That evidence, he observed, was hardly required in so glaring a case, but I am glad of it, and indeed, none of our judges like to condemn a criminal upon circumstantial evidence, be it ever so decisive. This was strange and unexpected intelligence. What could it mean? That my eyes deceived me? And was I really as mad as the whole world would believe me to be if I disclosed the object of my suspicions? I hastened to return home, and Elizabeth eagerly demanded the result. My cousin, replied I. It is decided as you may have expected. All judges had rather that 10 innocent should suffer than that one guilty should escape. But she has confessed. This was a dire blow to Elizabeth, who had replied with firmness upon Justine's innocence. Alas, said she, how shall I ever again believe in human goodness? Justine, whom I loved and esteemed as my sister, how could you put on those smiles of innocence only to betray? My mild eyes seem incapable of any severity or guile, and yet she has committed a murder. Soon after we heard that the poor victim had expressed a desire to see my cousin. My father wished her not to go, but said that he felt it to her own judgment and feelings to decide. Hello, Senko. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well. And thank you for the star. We are continuing Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Let me again fix myself in my chair so that I can sit up straight. so uncomfortable in my chair. Ugh, there we go. Yes, said Elizabeth. I will go, although she is guilty, and you, Victor, shall accompany me. I cannot go alone. The idea of this visit was torture to me, yet I could not refuse. We entered the gloomy prison chamber and beheld Justine sitting on some straw at the farther end. Her hands were manacled and her head rested on her knees. She rose on seeing us enter, and when we were left alone with her, she threw herself at the feet of Elizabeth, weeping bitterly. My cousin wept also. "Oh, Justine," said she, "why did you rob me of my last consolation? I relied on your innocence, and although I was then very wretched, I was not so miserable as I am now." "And do you believe me also that I am and do you also believe that I am so very, very wicked? Do you also join with my enemies to crush me, to condense me as a murderer?" Her voice was suffocated with sobs. "Rise, my poor girl," said Elizabeth. "Why do you kneel if you are innocent? I am not one of your enemies. I believed you guiltless, notwithstanding every evidence, until I heard that you had yourself declared your guilt. That report you say is false, and be assured, dear Justine, that nothing can shake my confidence in you for a moment but your own confession." "I did confess, but I confessed a lie. I confessed that I might not obtain absolution. But now that falsehood lies heavier at my heart than all my other sins. The God of heaven forbid me. Forgive me. Ever since I was condemned, my confessor has besieged me. He threatened and menaced until I almost began to think that I was the monster that he said I was. He threatened excommunication and hellfire in my last moments if I continued to obdurate. Dear lady, I had none to support me. All looked on me as a wretched doomed to ignominy and perdition. What could I do? In an evil hour I subscribed to a lie, and now only I am truly miserable." She paused, weeping, and then continued. "I thought with horror, my sweet lady, that you should believe your Justine, whom your blessed aunt had so highly honored, and whom you loved, was a creature capable of a crime which none but the devil himself could have perpetrated. Dear William, dearest blessed child, I shall soon, I soon shall see you again in heaven, where we shall all be happy, and that consoles me, going as I am to suffer ignominy and death. Oh, Justine, forgive me for having for one moment distrusted you. Why did you confess? But do not mourn, dear girl. Do not fear. I will proclaim, I will prove your innocence. I will melt the stony hearts of your enemies by my tears and prayers. You shall not die. You, my playfellow, my companion, my sister, perish on the scaffold? No, no, I never could survive so horrible a misfortune." Justine shook her head mournfully. "I do not fear to die," said she. "That pang is past. God raises my weakness and gives me courage to endure the worst. I leave a sad and bitter world, and if you remember me and think of me as one unjustly condemned, I am resigned to the fate awaiting me. Learn from me, dear lady, to submit in patience to the will of heaven." During this conversation, I had retired to a corner of the prison room where I could conceal the horrible anguish that possessed me. Despair! Who dared talk of that? The poor victim, who on the morrow was to pass the awful boundary between life and death, felt not as I did such deep and bitter agony. I gnashed my teeth and ground them together, uttering a groan that came from my inmost soul. Justine started. When she saw who it was, she approached me and said, "Dear sir, you are very kind to visit me. You, I hope, do not believe that I am guilty?" I could not answer. "No, Justine," said Elizabeth. He is more convinced of your innocence than I was. For even when we heard, for even when he heard that you had confessed, he did not credit it. I truly thank him. In these last moments, I feel the sincerest gratitude toward those who think of me with kindness. How sweet is the affection of others to such a wretch as I am. It removes more than half my misfortune, and I feel as if I could die in peace. And now that my innocence is acknowledged to you, dear lady, and your cousin. Hello, Austin. Welcome in. It's good to see you. Welcome in. Thus the poor sufferer tried to comfort others and herself. She'd indeed gained the resignation she desired, but I, the true murderer, felt a never-dying worm alive in my bosom. Oh, give me one moment. It seems that my IRIAM has crashed. In the meantime, while I restore my IRIAM and I also get a drink of water, how are you all faring? Are you all doing good? Doing well? Make sure to stretch as much as you can and stay hydrated. It's getting really warm these days, so make sure to get as much water in you as possible. That's such a cute little seal emote. I need to add seal emotes to my channel for Dante. Let me wait for IRIAM to load in. There we go. We should be back. It seems that my IRIAM decided to. It keeps wanting to die. So. Hey, Starry. Something came in the mail today. What came in the mail? Oh, that's crazy. My IRIAM keeps crashing. No, I'm trying to restore it, but it keeps crashing. Come on, don't you dare lag. Okay, there we go. Can you guys hear me now? It seems my IRIAM is crashing more than usual. For my phone, I connected to my data, so. But I did see that something came in the mail today. What came in the mail, if I may ask? If I may ask, what did you get? Oh, oh my goodness. Thank you for the boba, and congratulations, Sonic, on your first star fan badge for the first time. Yuppie! Oh my god, we're getting a starry badge and a June badge in the month of June. Happy Pride, everybody! We badge, yuppie! We love to see it. Thank you so much. I appreciate you a lot, Sonic. Thank you. Oh my goodness. Oh my. Let me do a pause again in order to say to June that I cannot hear, but I'm still here. I cannot listen, but you're doing great. There we go. I need to give reassurance to my one of my favorite critters. There we go. Thank you for the badge. I appreciate you so much, Sonic. Elizabeth also wept, and was unhappy, but hers also was the mystery of innocence, which, like a cloud that passes over the fair moon, for a while hides, but cannot tarnish its brightness. Anguish and despair had penetrated into the core of my heart. It bore a hell within me which nothing could extinguish. We stayed several hours with Justine, and it was with great difficulty that Elizabeth could tear herself away. I wish, cried she, that I were to die with you. I could not live in this world of misery. Justine assumed an air of cheerfulness, but she with difficulty repressed her bitter tears. She embraced Elizabeth, and said in a voice of half suppressed emotion, Farewell, my sweet lady. Dear Elizabeth, my beloved and only friend, may heaven and its bounty bless and preserve you. May this be the last misfortune that you will ever suffer. Live and be happy, and make others so. And on the morrow, Justine died. Elizabeth's heartrending eloquence failed to move the judges from their settled conviction in the criminality of the saintly sufferer. My passionate and indignant appeal were lost upon them, and when I received their cold answers and heard the harsh, unfeeling reasoning of those men, my purposed avowal died away on my lips. Thus I might proclaim myself a madman, but not revoke the sentence passed upon my wretched victim. He perished on the scaffold as a murderess. Starry said, "I love you," and also started barking. I love June. I love June. I love June. We love June in this household. We love June in this household. Guys, make sure to also say that you support and care for June. June is a very beloved critter in this community. R.I.P. Justine, you were a girl, unfortunately, accused of a crime you did not commit. I feel bad for her for sure. The poor thing had to live with the death of a child that she raised basically as her own son. I agree. Justice for Justine. Justice for June. From the tortures of my own heart, I turned to contemplate the deep and voiceless grief of my Elizabeth. This was also my doing, and my father's woe, and the desolation of that late so smiling home. All was the work of my thrice accursed hands. Ye weep, unhappy ones, but these are not your last tears. Again shall you rise to funeral wail, and the sounds of your lamentation shall again and again be heard. Frankenstein, your son, your kinsman, your early, much-loved friend, he who would spend each vital drop of blood for your sakes, who has no thought nor sense of joy, except that it is mirrored also in your dear countenances, who would fill the air with blessings and spend his life in serving you. He bids you weep, to shed countless tears, happy beyond his hopes, and thus inexorable fate be satisfied, and if the destruction paused before the peace of the grave has succeeded to your sad torments. Thus spoke my prophetic soul, as, torn by remorse, horror, and despair, I beheld those I loved spend vain sorrow upon the graves of William and Justine, the first hapless victims to my unhallowed arts. Hello, Pepper Raven. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for the star. We are currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Chapter 9. Capítulo 9. Nothing is more painful to the human mind than, after the feelings have been worked up by a quick succession of events, the dead calmness of inaction and uncertainty which follows and deprives the soul of both of hope and fear. Justine died. She rested, and I was alive. The blood flowed freely in my veins, but a weight of despair and remorse pressed on my heart which nothing could remove. Sleep fled from my eyes. I wandered like an evil spirit, for I had committed deeds of mischief beyond description horrible, and more, much more, I persuaded myself, was yet behind. IRIAM, like California, should be considered a study in Filipino-Hispanic relations. I agree. There's a lot of Latinos, and Filipinos in IRIAM, which I find very funny. There's a lot of Filipinos in like Hispanic slash Latinos in IRIAM, which is very very intriguing. Like it's the percentage of Filipinos are much more, and I find that very funny in a way. It's actually quite curious. But it's also fun. It's very interesting to see how many people are over here on IRIAM. I don't know. I really really don't know. Yet my heart overflowed with kindness and the love of virtue. I had begun life with benevolent intentions and thirsted for the moment when I should put them in practice and make myself useful to my fellow beings. Now all was blasted. Instead of that serenity of consciousness, of conscience, which allowed me to look back upon the past with self-satisfaction, and from there to gather promise of new hopes, I was seized by remorse and the sense of guilt, which hurried me away to a hell of intense tortures, such as no language can describe. Oh, actually, it activated a playlist. Good to know. Good to know. This state of mind preyed upon my health, which had perhaps never entirely recovered from the first shock it had sustained. Hello, Night Parade. Welcome on in. We're still reading Frankenstein. Welcome in. I shunned the face of man. All sound of joy or complacency was torture to me. Solitude was my only consolation. Deep, dark, death-like solitude. My father observed with pain the alterations perceptible in my disposition and habits, and endeavored by arguments deduced from the feelings of his serene conscience and guiltless life, to inspire me with fortitude and awaken in me the courage to dispel the dark cloud which brooded over me. "Do you think, Victor," said he, "that I do not suffer also? No one could love a child more than I loved your brother." Tears came into his eyes as he spoke. "But it is not a duty to survivors that we should refrain from augmenting their unhappiness by an appearance of immoderate grief. It is also a duty owed to yourself. Excessive sorrow prevents improvement or enjoyment, or even the discharge of daily usefulness, without which no man is fit for society." This advice, although good, was totally inapplicable to my case. I should have been the first to hide my grief and console my friends if remorse had not mingled its bitterness and terror, its alarm with my other sensations. Now I can only answer my father with a look of despair and endeavor to hide myself from his view. About this time we retired to our house in Belrive. This change was particularly agreeable to me. The shutting of the gate regularly at 10 o'clock, and the impossibility of remaining on the lake after that hour, had rendered our residence within the walls of Geneva very irksome to me. Congratulations, June, on June. Oh my God, Cupid on your third star fan badge. Yuppie! For some reason, I read June because I was looking at my computer when I was saying that. Congratulations, Q. Congratulations, Yuppie, on your third star fan badge. Yuppie! 11th time. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. We're so close to the 12th time. Next month, guys. Next month. Hello, Raven. Welcome on into stream for the first time. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your Heavenly Harmony, and Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical subject artist. Welcome in. We are currently doing some ASMR, and we are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I hope you enjoy the evening so far. I was now free. Often after the rest of the family had retired for the night, I took the boat and passed many hours upon the water. Sometimes with my sails set, I was carried by the wind, and sometimes after rowing into the middle of the lake, I left the boat to pursue its own course and gave way to my own miserable reflections. I was often tempted, and all was at peace around me, and I the only unquiet thing that wandered restless in a scene so beautiful and heavenly, if I except some bat or some frogs, whose harsh and interrupted croaking was heard only when I approached the shore. Often, I say, I was tempted to plunge into the silent lake, that the waters might close over me, my forever. Calamities forever. But I was restrained when I thought of the heroic and suffering Elizabeth, whom I tenderly loved, and whose existence was bound up in mine. I thought also of my father and surviving brother. Should I, by my base desertion leave them exposed and unprotected to the malice of the fiend whom I had let loose among them? At these moments I wept bitterly, and wished that peace would revisit my mind only that I might afford them consolation and happiness. But that could not be. Remorse extinguished every hope. I had been the author of unalterable. My reading is so. I had been the author of unalterable evils, and I lived in daily fear, lest the monster whom I had created should perpetrate some new wickedness. I had an obscure feeling that all was not over, and that he would still commit some signal crime, which by its enormity should also efface the recollection of the past. There was also scope for fear, so long as anything I loved remained behind. My abhorrence of this fiend cannot be conceived. When I thought of him, I gnashed my teeth. My eyes became inflamed, and I ardently wished to extinguish that life which I had so thoughtlessly bestowed. When I reflected on his crimes and malice, my hatred and revenge burst all bounds of moderation. I would have made a pilgrimage to the highest peak of the Andes, could I, when there, have precipitated him to their base. I wished to see him again that I might wreak the utmost extent of abhorrence on his head, and avenge the deaths of William and Justine. The cold is making my lips and nose slightly dry. Excuse me. The cold is, in fact, affecting me deeply. Goodness gracious. I apologize as if I'm a little bit sickly. Yeah, I'm a little bit cold. I have a blanket around me, but the cold still manages to kind of stay in my nose so far. But that's fine. Let's continue. Our house was the house of mourning. My father's health was deeply shaken by the horrors of the recent events. Elizabeth was sad and desponding. She no longer took delight in her ordinary occupations. All pleasure seemed to all pleasure seemed to her sacrilege toward the dead. Eternal woe and tears she then thought was the just tribute that she should pay to innocence so blasted and destroyed. She was no longer that happy creature who in earlier youth wandered with me on the banks of the lake and talked with ecstasy of our future prospect. The first of those sorrows which are sent to wean us from the earth had visited her, and its dimming influence quenched her dearest smiles. And I reflect, my dear cousin, said she, on the miserable death of Justine Moritz. I no longer see the world in its worst, and its works as they before appeared to me. Before I looked upon the accounts of vice and injustice that I read in books, or heard from others as tales of ancient days, or imaginary evils. At least they were remote and more familiar to reason than that to the imagination. But now misery has come home, and men appear to me as monsters thirsting for each other's blood. Yet I am certainly unjust. Everybody believed that poor girl to be guilty, and if she could have committed the crime for which she suffered, assuredly she would have been the most depraved of human creatures. For the sake of a few jewels, to have murdered the son of her benefactor and friend, a child whom she had nursed from its birth, and appeared to love as it had been her own. I could not consent to the death of any human being. But certainly I should have thought such a creature unfit to remain in the society of men. You are of the same opinion, and that confirms me. Alas, Victor, when falsehood could look so like the truth, who could assure themselves of certain happiness? I feel as if I were walking on the edge of a precipice, toward which thousands are crowding and endeavoring to plunge me into the abyss. William and Justine were assassinated, and the murderer escapes. He walks about the world free and perhaps respected. But even if I were condemned to suffer on the scaffold for the same crimes, I would not change places with such a wretch. I listened to this discourse with the extremest agony. I, not indeed, not indeed, but in effect, was the true murderer. Elizabeth read my anguish in my countenance, and kindly taking my hand, said, "My dearest friend, you must calm yourself. These events have affected me, God knows how deeply, but I am not so wretched as you are. There is an expression of despair, and sometimes of revenge, in your countenance that makes me tremble. Dear Victor, banish these dark passions. Remember the friends around you, who center all their hopes in you. Have we lost the power of rendering you happy? For we love, for we are true to each other. Here, in this land of peace and beauty, your native country, we may reap every tranquil blessing. What can disturb our peace?" And could not such words from her whom I fondly prized before every other gift of fortune suffice to chase away the fiend that lurked in my heart? Even as she spoke, I drew near to her, as if in terror, lest at that very moment the destroyer had been near to rob me of her. Thus not the tenderness of friendship, nor the beauty of earth, nor of heaven could redeem my soul from woe. My very accents of love were ineffectual. I was encompassed by a cloud which no beneficial influence could penetrate. The wounded deer dragging its faint limbs to some untrodden brake, yet decays upon the arrow which had pierced it, and to die was but the type of me. Sometimes I could cope with the sullen despair that overwhelmed me, but sometimes the whirlwind passions of my soul drove me to seek, by bodily exercise and by change of place, some relief from my intolerable sensations. It was during an access of this kind that I suddenly left my home, and bending my steps towards the new alpine valleys, sought in the magnificence, the eternity of such scenes to forget myself and my ephemeral, because human, sorrows. My wanderings were directed toward the valley of Chamonix. I had visited frequently during my boyhood. 6 years had passed since then. I was a wreck, but naught had changed in those savage and enduring scenes. I performed the first part of my journey on horseback. I afterward hired a mule, as the more sure-footed and least liable to receive injury on those rugged roads. The weather was fine. It was about the middle of the month of August, nearly 2 months after the death of Justine, that miserable epoch from which I dated all my woe. The weight upon my spirit was sensibly lightened as I plunged yet deeper into the ravine of Arve, the immense mountains and precipices that overhung me on each side. The sound of the river raging among the rocks, and the dashing of the waterfalls round, spoke of a power mighty as omnipotence, and I ceased to fear, or to bend before any being less almighty than that which had created and ruled the elements, here displayed in their most terrific guise. Still, as I ascended higher, the valley assumed a more magnificent and astonishing character. Ruined castles hanging on the precipices of piney mountains, the impetuous Arve, and cottages every here and there, peeping forth from among the trees, formed a scene of singular beauty. But it was augmented and rendered sublime by the almighty Alps, whose white and shining pyramids and domes towered above all, as belongings to another earth, the inhabitations of another race of beings. I passed the bridge of Pellissier, where the ravine which the river forms opened before me, and I began to ascend the mountains that overhangs it. Soon after I entered the valley of Chamonix. This valley is more wonderful and sublime, but not so beautiful and picturesque as that of Servox, though which I had just passed. The high and snowy mountains were its immediate boundaries, but I saw no more ruined castles and fertile fields. Immense glaciers approached the road. I heard the rumbling thunders of the falling avalanche and marked the smoke of its passage. Mount Blanc, the supreme and magnificent Mount Blanc, raised itself from the surrounding agiles, I think, and its tremendous dome overlooked the land. I do not know how to pronounce that word in specific, so I apologize. It is spelled Aiguilles. Again, there are some words that I do not know how to properly pronounce, so if I do perhaps know how to, if you do know how to pronounce them, I do apologize. Uh, English is, funnily enough, not my first language. A tingling, lost, long sense of pleasure overcame across me during this journey. Some turn in the road, some new object suddenly perceived and recognized, reminded me of days gone by, and were associated with the light-hearted gaiety of boyhood. The very winds whispered in soothing accents, and maternal nature bade me weep no more. Then again the kindly influence ceased to act. I found myself fettered again to grief and indulging in all the misery of reflection. And I spurred on my animal, striving so to forget the world, my fears, and more than all myself, or in a more desperate fashion, I alighted and threw myself on the grass, weighted down by horror and despair. At length I arrived at the village of Chamonix. Exhaustion succeeded to the extreme fatigue both of body and of mind, which I had endured. For a short space of time I remained at the window, watching the pallid lightnings that played about Mount Blanc, and listening to the rushing of the Arve, which pursued its noisy way beneath. The same lulling sounds acted as a lullaby to my too keen sensations. When I placed my head upon my pillow, slept crept over me. I felt it as it came and blessed the giver of oblivion. Taking a small water break as we go to chapter 10, capítulo 10. Oh dear, my stomach just rumbled. It seems that I might have to grab myself a snack. Oh boy. Whew. Yep, definitely. I'm probably gonna have to get a snack later because my body is wanting some food. Alright, I've drank some water. Let's lock in. I spent the following day roaming through the valley. I stood beside the sources of the Aveyron. Sorry, Arveyron. That's the word. Which takes their rise in a glacier. That which slow pace is advancing down from the summits of the hills to barricade the valley. The abrupt sides of vast mountains were before me. The icy walls of the glacier overhung me. A few shattered pines were scattered around. The solemn silence of this glorious presence chamber of imperial nature was broken only by the brawling waves. With the fall of some vast fragment, the thunder sounds of the cracking reverberated along the mountains of the accumulated ice, which, through the silent working of immutable laws, were ever and anon rent and torn, as if it had been but a plaything in their hands. These sublime and magnificent scenes afforded me the greatest consolation that I was capable of receiving. They elevated me from all littleness of feeling, and though they did not remove my grief, they subdued and tranquilized it. In some degree also they diverted my mind from the thoughts over which I had brooded for the last month. I retired to rest at night, my slumbers, as it were, waited on and ministered to by the assemblance of the grand shapes which I had contemplated during the day. Whew. They congregated round me, the unsustained snowy mountain top, the glittering pinnacle, the pine woods, and Thank you so much for the follow, Julian. Welcome to the auditorium as you are now a Starlight. Welcome on in. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your heavenly harmony and Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical subject artist. Welcome on in. You're currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope your evening is going well so far. The ragged bay ravine, the eagles soaring amidst the clouds, they all gathered round me and bade me be at peace. Where had they fled when the next morning I awoke? All of soul inspiriting fled with sleep, and dark melancholy clouded every thought. The rain was pouring in torrents, and thick mists hid the summits of the mountains, so that I even saw not the faces of those mighty friends. Still, I would penetrate this misty veil, and seek them in their cloudy retreats. What were rain and storm to me? A mule was brought to the door, and I resolved to ascend to the summit of Mount Tanvert. I remembered the effect that the view of the tremendous and ever-moving glacier had produced upon my mind when I first saw it. It had then filled me with a sublime ecstasy that gave wing to the soul, and allowed it to soar from the obscure world to light and joy. The sight of the awful and majestic in nature had indeed always the effect of solemnizing my mind and causing me to forget the passing cares of life. I determined to go without a guide, for I was well acquainted with the path, and the presence of another would destroy the solitary grandeur of the scene. The ascent is precipitous, but the path is cut into continual and short windings, which enables you to surmount the perpendicularity of the mountain. It is a scene terrifically desolate. In a thousand spots the traces of the winter avalanche may be perceived, where trees lie broken and strewed on the ground, some entirely broken, others bent, leaning upon the jutting rocks of the mountains, or transversely upon other trees. The path, as you ascend higher, is intersected by ravines of snow, down which stones continually roll from above. One of them is particularly dangerous, as the slightest sound, such as even speaking in a loud voice, produces a concussion of air sufficient to draw destruction upon the head of the speaker. The pines are not tall or luxuriant, but they are somber and add an air of severity to the scene. I looked on the valley beneath. Vast mists were rising from the rivers which ran through it, and curling in thick, bright wreaths around the opposite mountains, whose summits were hid in the uniform clouds, while rain poured from the dark sky, and added to the melancholy impression I received from the objects around me. Alas! Why does man boast of sensibility superior to those apparent in the brute? It only renders them more necessary beings. If our impulses were confined to hunger, thirst, and desire, we might be nearly free. And now we are moved by every wind that blows, and a chance word or scene that the word may convey to us. We rest, the dream has power to poison sleep. We rise when wandering thoughts pollute the day. We feel, conceive a reason, laugh or weep. Embrace one woe or cast our cares away. It is the same, for it be joy or sorrow, the path of its departure still is free. Man's yesterday may never be like morrow, not may endure but mutability. It was nearly noon when I arrived at the top of the ascent. For some time I sat upon the rock that overlooks the sea of ice. A mist covered both that and the surrounding mountains. Presently a breeze dissipated the cloud, and I descended upon the glacier. The surface is very uneven, rising like the waves of a troubled sea, descending low and interspersed by rifts that sink deep. The fields of ice is almost a league in width, but I spent nearly 2 hours in crossing it. The opposite mountains at a bare perpendicular rock. From the side where I now stood, Mont Tanvert was exactly opposite, at the distance of a league. Above it rose Mont Blanc in awful majesty. I remained in the recess of the rocks, gazing on this wonderful and stupendous scene. The scene, or rather the vast rivers of ice, wound among its dependent mountains, whose aerial summits hung over its recesses. Their icy and glittering peaks shone in the starlight above the clouds. My heart, which was before sorrowful, now swelled with something like joy. I exclaimed. Wandering spirits, if indeed ye wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life. As I said this, I suddenly beheld a figure, a man, at some distance, advancing toward me with superhuman speed. He bended over the crevices in the ice, among which I had walked with caution. His stature also, as he approached, seemed to exceed that of man. I was troubled. A mist came over my eyes, and I felt a faintness seize me, but I was quickly restored by the cold gale of the mountains. I perceived that the shape came nearer. Sight tremendous and abhorred that it was the wretch whom I had created. I trembled with rage and horror, resolving to await his approach, and then close with him in mortal combat. He approached. His countenance bespoke bitter anguish, combined with disdain and malignity, while its unearthly ugliness rendered it almost too horrible for human eyes. But I scarcely observed this. Rage and hatred had at first deprived me of utterance, and I recovered only to overwhelm him with words expressive of furious devastation and contempt. "Devil!" I exclaimed, "do you dare approach me? Do you not fear the fierce vengeance of my arm wreaked on your miserable head? Begone, vile insect! I'd rather stay, that I may trample you to dust. And oh, that I could, with the extinction of your miserable existence, restore those victims who you have so diabolically murdered." "I expected this reception," said the demon. "All men hate the wretched. How, then, must I be hated, whom am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature, to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty toward me, and I will do mine towards you, and rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them, and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death, until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. Abhorred monster! Fiend that thou art! The tortures of hell are too mild of vengeance for thy crimes. Wretched devil, you reproach me with your creation. Come now, then, I may extinguish the spark which I know neglectfully bestowed. My rage was without bounds. I sprang on him, impelled by all the feelings which can arm one being against the existence of another. He easily eluded me, and said, "Be calm. I entreat you to hear me, before you give vent to your hatred to my devoted head. Have I not suffered enough that you seek to increase my misery? Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, is dear to me, and I will defend it. Remember, thou hast made me more powerful than thyself. My height is superior to thine, my joints more supple. But I will not be tempted to set myself in opposition to thee. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel whom thou drivest from joy for no misdeed. Everywhere I see bliss from which I alone am irrevocably excluded. I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous. Begone! I will not hear you. There can be no community between you and me. We are enemies. Begone, and let us try our strength in a fight, in which one must fall." How can I move thee? With no entreaties cost thee to return a favorable eye upon thy creature who implores thy goodness and compassion. Believe me, Frankenstein, I was benevolent. My soul glowed with love and humanity. But am I not alone, miserably and now alone? You, my creator, abhor me. What hope can I gather from your fellow creatures who owe me nothing? They spurn and hate me. The desert mountains and dreary glaciers are my refuge. I have wandered here many days. The caves of ice, which only do not in which I only do not fear, are a dwelling to me, and the only one which man does not grudge. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do, and arm themselves for my destruction. Shall I not them hate them who abhor me? I will keep no terms with my enemies. I am miserable, and they shall share my wretchedness. It is in your power to recompense me, and deliver them from an evil which it only remains for you to make so great that only you and your family, but thousands of others, shall be swallowed up with the whirlwinds of its rage. Let your compassion be moved, and do not disdain me. Listen to my tale. When you have heard that, abandon or commiserate me, as you shall judge that I deserve. But hear me. The guilty are allowed by human laws, bloody as they are, to speak in their own defense before they are condemned. Listen to me, Frankenstein. You accuse me of murder, and yet you would, with a satisfied conscience, destroy your own creature. Oh, praise the eternal justice of man! Yet I ask you not to spare me. Listen to me then, if you can, if you will, destroy the work of your hands. Why do you call to my remembrance, I rejoin, circumstances of which I shudder to reflect, that I have been the miserable origin and author? Cursed be the day, abhorred devil, in which you first saw light. Cursed, although I cursed myself, be the hands that formed you. You have made me wretched beyond expression. You have left me no power to consider myself I am just to you or not. Begone! Relieve me from the sight of your detested form. Thus I relieve thee, my creator. Hello, Su Young. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. Thank you for the star. I hope you're doing well. We're currently continuing to read Frankenstein. Frankenstein right now is currently having a conversation or quote unquote face off with the creature. With the monster creature. It's very good to hear. I'm very, very glad to hear that. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening then while we continue to read. Thus I relieve thee, my creator, he said, and placed his hated hands before my eyes, which I flung from me with violence. Thus I take from thee a sight which you abhor. So thou canst listen to me, then grant me thy compassion. By the virtues that I once possessed, I demand this from you. Hear my tale. It is long and strange, and the temperature of this place is not fitting to your fine sensations. Come to the hut upon the mountains. The sun is yet high in the heavens. Before it descends to hide itself behind yon snowy precipices, and illuminate another world. You will have heard my story and can decide. On you it rests whether I quit forever the neighborhood of man, and lead a harmless life, or become the scourge of your fellow creatures and the author of your own speedy ruin. My stomach is grumbling. Ah. As he said this, he led the way across the ice. I followed. My heart was full, and I did not answer him, but, as I proceeded, I weighed the various arguments that he had used, and determined at least to listen to his tale. I was partially urged by curiosity, and compassion confirmed my resolution. I had hitherto supposed him to be the murderer of my brother, and I eagerly sought a confirmation or denial of this opinion. For the first time also, I felt what the duties of a creator toward his creature were, and that I ought to render him happy before I complained of his wickedness. These motives urged me to comply with his demands. We crossed the ice, therefore, and I ascended the opposite rock. The air was cold, and the rain again began to descend. We entered the hut, the fiend with an air of exultation, I with a heavy heart and depressed spirits. But I consented to listen, and seating myself at the fire which my odious companion had lighted. He thus begun his tale. Chapter 11, Capítulo 11. Give me one small moment, though, because I believe that we are almost to reach 2 hours. Yippee! Give me one small moment to take a nice stretch. Take a quick snack, and I will return in a moment. Oh great heavens! Oh great heavens! Hold on. I was in the middle of a snack break. Hold on. I'm still in the middle of my snack break, but hello, Estef, and hello, Raiders. Welcome on into stream. Hello, hello. And thank you so much for the follow, Par. Welcome to the auditorium as you are now a Starlight. I'm snacking on some Funyuns. I had them nearby. But to those who are new here and do not know who I am, my name is Starry Muse, I'm your Heavenly Harmony, and Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here. As your musical subject artist, welcome on into the stream. We are currently doing an ASMR stream, a continuation, and we are currently um, reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So we definitely have a lot of stuff here. Mira has power here. True, she does. Did you guys enjoy your time with June? And I am very happy for the critter. I was also observing the stream, although I could not personally tune into it. I am very proud of the critter for its first ASMR, so yippee! Oh yes? Hell yeah. I'm very glad to hear that. Actually, considering it is ASMR, a nice crunch doesn't hurt anybody. As you can tell, I was in the middle of my snack break, and I saw that you guys had rated and immediately raced to my computer beforehand. With a lot of love and respect. I somehow sincerely doubt that. That was very funny, actually. That's quite funny. Right now, for those who are also interested in knowing, and just thank you so much for the Starry stuff. I hope you're doing well as well. We are about to tune in into chapter 11. We are 116 pages in. We have officially read over 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 40 pages, I believe. So far, we have read about 40 pages so far. So, not bad. Indeed, indeed. Very much a slay. But I'm very glad to see so many critters here, so yippee! It was just having a bit of a snack break, so let me continue a couple of chips here. I do have, a couple of chips here, and then I will tune back in to continue reading. And of course, everybody please hydrate yourself if you haven't. Check your posture and get cozy. You're here for these Funyuns. A friend got them for me, and I have been eating them ever since. I'm also kind of excited because someone on my throne paid out a couple of the snacks that I had, and so I need to send that money to myself. And once I do, I will order them to have them delivered to me because I really want snacks now. Hello, Sota. Welcome on in. Welcome in. I hope you're doing good. Welcome in. Welcome in. I hope you're doing well. Hmm? Wait. Wait. Hold on. Wait, you're gonna wait. What? You're going to debut? Wait, hello? Are you gonna start streaming on Twitch? Onions are very, very good if you ask me. Are you gonna be on Twitch? Hello? Let's go. Sota time. Let's go. We love a good debut. Let's go. What kind of debut is it? What kind of debut is it? I wiggle my Twitch or here. I don't think you're able to on IRIAM though, cause just to very cautiously. You live in the States. If you do, obviously, if you live in the States or in Canada, you might be able to, obviously. But do you live in either of them to be able to allow to stream? Because I'm not sure if you were originally from somewhere. That's why I mentioned it. Hold on, let me quietly munch on my chips because I know we came here for reading, not for munching. So give me one small sec. Hello, Sona. Welcome in and thank you for the star. I hope you're doing well. We were just having a snack break, in which I am now finishing up. I'm very, very glad to hear that. It's good to see you. Alright, let us put this bag away. Ah, thank you for the hydrate. Let me close this up. Alright. True. Always hydrate before, but right after snack. I'm very glad to hear that you're doing good, Sana. For for context, Sota, we are actively doing some ASMR reading, and we are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Oh, the button did not mute. Currently, we are reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein right now. We're doing a bit of an ASMR stream. I think that's good. Alrighty. Let us return to what we were doing. Let's drape this blanket over myself, and we will do what is known as sitting back and relaxing. Alright. We are now going into chapter 11. Hi, Par. Welcome in. And thank you for the star. I hope you're doing good. Alright. Let us fully go back in. It is with considerate difficulty that I remember the original era of my being. All the events of that period appear confused and indistinct. A strange multiplicity of sensations seized me, and when I saw, felt, heard, and smelled at the same time, and it was indeed a long time before I learned to distinguish between the operations of my various senses. By degrees I remember a stronger light pressed upon my nerves, and so that I was obliged to shut my eyes. Darkness had come over me and troubled me. Hardly had I felt this when, by opening my eyes, as I now suppose the light poured in upon me again. I walked, and I believe descended, but I presently found a great alteration in my sensations. Before, dark and opaque bodies had surrounded me, impervious to my touch or sight, and I now found that I could wander on at liberty, with no obstacles which I could not either surmount or avoid. The light became more and more oppressive to me, and the heat wearing me as I walked, I sought to a place that I could receive shade. This was the forest near Ingolstadt, and here I lay by the side of a brook, resting from my fatigue, until I felt tormented by hunger and thirst. This roused me with my nearly dormant state, and I ate some berries which I found hanging on the trees or lying on the ground. I slaked my thirst at the brook, and then lying down was overcome by sleep. It was dark when I awoke. I felt cold also, and half frightened, as it were, instinctively, finding myself so desolate. Before I had quitted your apartment, on a sensation of cold, I had covered myself with some clothes, but these were insufficient to secure me from the dews of night. As a poor, helpless, miserable wretch, I knew, and I could distinguish nothing, but feeling pain evade me on all sides, I sat down and wept. Soon a gentle light stole over the heavens, and gave me a sensation of pleasure. I started up, and beheld a radiant form rise from among the trees. I gazed with a kind of wonder. It moved slowly, but I enlightened my path, and I again went out in search of berries. I was still cold, when under one of the trees I found a huge cloak. with which I covered myself and sat upon the ground. No distinct ideas occupied my mind. All was confused. I felt light and hunger and thirst and darkness. Innumerable sounds rang in my ears, and on all sides various scents saluted me. The only object that I could distinguish was the bright moon, and I fixed my eyes on that with pleasure. Several changes of day and night passed, and the orb of night had greatly lessened when I began to distinguish my sensations from each other. I gradually saw plainly the clear stream that supplied me with drink, and the trees that shaded me with their foliage. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound which often saluted my ears proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals whom had often intercepted the light from my eyes. I began also to observe, with great accuracy, the forms that surrounded me, and to perceive the boundaries of the radiant roof of light which unoccupied me. When canopied me. Sometimes I tried to imitate the placing sounds of the birds, but was unable. Sometimes I wished to express my sensations of my own mode, but the uncouth and inarticulate sounds which broke from me frightened me into silence again. The moon had disappeared from the night, and again, with a lessened form, showed itself, while I still remained in the forest. My sensations had by this time become distinct, and my mind received every day additional ideas. My eyes became accustomed to the light, and to perceive objects in their right forms. I distinguished the insect from the herb, and by degrees, one herb from another. I found that the sparrow uttered none but harsh notes, whilst those of the blackbird and thrush were sweet and enticing. One day, when I was oppressed by cold, I found a fire which had been left by some wandering beggars, and was overcome with delight at the warmth I experienced from it. In my joy, I thrust my hand into the live embers, but quickly drew it out again with a cry of pain. How strange, I thought, that the same cause should produce such opposite effects. I examined the materials of the fire, and to my joy found it to be composed of wood. I quickly collected some branches, but they were wet and would not burn. I was pained at this, and sat still watching the operation of the fire. The wet wood which I had placed near the heat dried, and itself became inflamed. I reflected on this, and by various branches I discovered the cause, and busied myself in collecting that great quantity, that I might try it, and have a plentiful supply of fire. When night came, and brought sleep with it, I was in the greatest fear lest my fire should be extinguished. I covered it carefully with dry wood and leaves, and placed wet branches upon it. Then spreading my cloak, I lay on the ground, and sank into sleep. It was morning when I awoke, and my first care was to visit the fire. I uncovered it, and a gentle breeze quickly fanned it into a flame. I observed this also, and contrived a few branches. A fan of branches, which roused the embers when they were nearly extinguished. When night came again, I found with pleasure that the fire gave light as well as heat, and that the discovery of this element was useful to me in my food. For I found some of the offals that the travelers had left had been roasted, and tasted much more savory than the berries I gathered from the trees. I tried, therefore, to dress my food in the same manner, placing it on the live embers. I found that the berries were spoiled by the operation, and the nuts and roots much improved. Food, however, became scarce, and I often spent the whole day searching in vain for a few acorns to assuage the pangs of hunger. When I found this, I resolved to quit the place that I hitherto inhabited to seek for one where the few wants I experienced would be more easily satisfied. In this emigration, I exceedingly lamented the loss of the fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not how to reproduce it. I gave several hours. Excuse me. In this emigration, I exceedingly lamented the loss of the fire which I had obtained through accident, and knew not to reproduce it. I gave several hours to the serious consideration of this difficulty, but I was obliged to relinquish all attempts to supply it, and wrapping myself up in my cloak, I struck across the wood toward the setting sun. Let me do a small stretch for a moment. Very sorry. Let me give myself a nice big stretch. I passed 3 days in these rambles, and at length discovered the open country. A great fall of snow had taken place the night before, and the wheels were one of uniform white. The appearance were disconsolate, and I found my feet chilled by the cold damp substance that covered the ground. It was about 7 in the morning, and I longed to obtain food and shelter. At length I perceived on a small hut on a rising ground which had doubtless been built for the convenience of some shepherd. This was a new sight to me, and I examined the structure with great curiosity. Finding the door open, I entered. An old man sat in it, near a fire over which he was preparing his breakfast. He turned on hearing noise, and perceiving me, shrieked loudly, and quitting the hut, ran across the fields with a speed of which his deliberated form hardly appeared capable. His appearance different from any had I ever been seen, and his flight somewhat surprised me. But I was enchanted by the appearance of the hut. Here the snow and the rain could not penetrate me. The ground was dry, and it presented to me then as exquisite and divine a retreat as pandemonium appeared to the demons of hell after their sufferings in the lake of fire. I greedily devoured the remnants of the shepherd's breakfast, which consisted of bread, cheese, milk, and wine. The latter, however, I did not like. Then, overcome by fatigue, I lay down among some straw and fell asleep. It was noon when I awoke, and allured by the warmth of the sun, which shone brightly on the white ground, I determined to recommence my travels, and, depositing the remains of the peasant's breakfast in the wallet I found, I proceeded across the fields for several hours, until at sunset I arrived at a village. How miraculous did this appear! The huts, the neater cottages, and stately houses engaged my admiration by turns. The vegetables in the gardens, the milk and cheese that I saw placed at the windows of some of the cottages allured my appetite. One of the best of these I entered, but I had hardly placed my foot within the door before the children shrieked, and one of the women fainted. The whole village was roused. Some fled, some attacked me, until grievously bruised by stones and many other kinds of missile weapons. I escaped to the open country and fearfully took refuge in a low hovel, quite bare and making a wretched appearance after the palaces I had beheld in the village. This hovel, however, proved a cottage of a neat and pleasant appearance, but after my late dearly odd experience, I dared not enter it. My place of refuge was constructed of wood, but so low that I could with difficulty sit upright in it. The wood, however, was placed on the earth, which formed the floor, but it was dry, and although the wind entered it by innumerable chinks, I found it an agreeable asylum from the snow and rain. Here then I retreated, and lay down happy to have found a shelter, however miserable from the inclemency of the season, and still more from the barbarity of man. I am so cold. Ow. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel, that I might view the adjacent cottage and discovery if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the. Yes, can I help you? Can I help you? What's the matter? Yes? What is it? Come on, lay down, lay down. Sorry, I'm currently petting my dog. No, no. As soon as morning dawned, I crept from my kennel, that I might view the adjacent cottage, and discovered if I could remain in the habitation I had found. It was situated against the back of the cottage, and surrounded on the sides, which were exposed by a pigsty and a clear pool of water. One part was open, and by that I had crept in, but I covered every crevice by which I might be perceived with stones and wood, yet in such a manner that I might move them on occasion to pass out. All the light I enjoyed came through the sty, and that was sufficient for me. Having thus arranged my dwelling and carpeted it with clean straw, I retired, for he saw the figure of a man at a distance, and I remembered too well my treatment the night before to trust myself in his power. I had first, however, provided for my sustenance for that day by a loaf of coarse bread, which I purloined, and a cup, with which I could drink more conveniently than from my hand, of the pure water which flowed by my retreat. The floor was a little raised, so that it was kept perfectly dry. By its vicinity to the chimney of the cottage it was tolerably warm. Being thus provided, I resolved to reside in this hovel until something should occur that might alter my determination. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence, the rain-dropping branches, and dank earth. I ate my breakfast with pleasure, and was about to remove a plank to procure myself a little water when I heard a step, and through looking through a small chink, I beheld a small creature, with a pail on her head, passing before my hovel. This girl was young, of gentle demeanor, unlike what I have since found cottagers and farmhouse servants to be. Yet she was meanly dressed, a coarse blue petticoat, and a lining jacket being her only garb. Her fair hair was plaited, but not adorned. She looked patient, yet sad. I lost sight of her. In about a quarter of an hour she returned bearing the pail, which now partly filled with milk. As she walked along seemingly incommoded with the burden, a young man met her, whose countenance expressed a dear despondence. Uttering a few sounds with an air of melancholy, he took the pail from her head and bore it to the cottage himself. He followed, and they disappeared. Presently I saw the young man again, with some tools in his hand, across the fields behind the cottage. The girl was also busied, sometimes in the house, and sometimes in the yard. On examining my dwelling, I found that one of the windows of the cottages had formerly occupied a part of it, but the panes had been filled up with wood. One of those was a small and almost imperceptible chink, through which the eye could just penetrate. Through this crevice a small room was visible, whitewashed and clean, very bare of furniture. In one corner, near a small fire, sat an old man, leaning his head on his hands in a disconsolate attitude. The young girl was occupied in arranging the cottage, but presently she took something out of a drawer which employed her hands, and she sat down beside her the old man, who, picking up an instrument, began to play, and to produce sounds sweeter than the voice of the thrush or the nightingale. It was a lovely sight, even to me, poor wretch, who had never beheld aught beautiful before. The silver hair and benevolent countenance of the aged cottager won my reverence, while the gentle manners of the girl enticed my love. He played a sweet mournful air, while I perceived drew tears from the eyes of his amiable companion, at which the old man took no notice until she sobbed audibly. She then produced a few sounds, and the fair creature, leaving her work, knelt at his feet. He raised her, and smiled with such kindness and affection that I felt sensations of a peculiar and overpowering nature. They were a mixture of pain and pleasure, such as I had never before experienced, either from hunger or cold, warmth or food, and I withdrew from the window, unable to bear these emotions. Soon after this, a young man returned, bearing on his shoulders a load of wood. The girl met him at the door, helped to relieve him of his burden, and, taking some of the fuel into the cottage, placed it on the fire. Then she and the youth went apart into a nook of the cottage, and then he showed her a large loaf and a piece of cheese. She seemed pleased, and went into the garden for some roots and plants, which she placed in water, and then upon the fire. She afterward continued her work, while the young man went into the garden and appeared busily employed in digging and pulling up roots. After he had employed thus about an hour, the young woman joined him, and they entered the cottage together. The old man had, in the meantime, been pensive, but on the appearance of his companions he assumed a more cheerful air, and they sat down to eat. The meal was quickly dispatched. The young woman was again occupied in arranging the cottage. The old man walked before the cottage in the sun for a few minutes, leaning on the arm of the youth. Nothing could exceed in beauty the contrast between those two excellent creatures. One was old, with silver hairs and a countenance beaming with benevolence and love. The younger was slight and graceful in his figure, and his features were molded by the finest symmetry. Yet his eyes and attitude expressed the utmost sadness and despondency. The old man returned to the cottage, and the youth, with tools different from those he had used in the morning, directed his step across the fields. Night quickly shut in, but to my extreme wonder, I found that the cottagers had a means of prolonging light with the use of tapers, and was delighted to find that the setting of the sun did not put an end to the pleasure I experienced in watching my human neighbors. In the evening, the young girl and her companion were employed in various occupations that I did not understand, and the old man again took up the instruments which produced the divine sounds that had enchanted me in the morning. So soon as he had finished, the youth began, not to play, but to utter sounds that were monotonous, and neither resembling the harmony of the old man's instruments nor the songs of the birds. I since found that he read out loud, but at that time I knew nothing of the science of words or letters. The family, after having been thus occupied for a short time, extinguished their lights and retired, as I conjectured, to rest. Chapter 12. Capítulo 12. I hope everyone's evening is going well so far. Remember to give yourself a good big stretch. And to also hydrate, please. Make sure to hydrate because currently the weather is very warm. Oh, just one small moment. And take a bit of water. I usually like to drink a bit of water between the chapters so I don't completely dry my throat. Let's continue. I lay on my straw, but I could not sleep. I thought of the occurrences of the day. I thought of the occurrences of the day. What chiefly struck me was the gentle manners of these people, and I longed to join them, but dared not. I remembered too well the treatment I had suffered the night before from the barbarous villagers, and resolved whatever course of conduct I might hereafter think it right to pursue me, that for the present I should remain quietly in my hovel, watching, and endeavoring to discover the motives which influenced their actions. The cottagers arose the next morning before the sun. The young woman arranged the cottage and prepared the food, and the youth departed after the meal. This day was passed in the same routine as that which preceded it. The young man was constantly employed out of doors, and the girl in various laborious occupations within. The old man, whom I soon perceived to be blind, employed his leisure hours on his instruments or in contemplation. Nothing could exceed the love and respect which the younger cottagers exhibited towards their venerable companion. They performed toward him every little office of affection and duty with gentleness, and he awarded them by his benevolent smiles. They were not entirely happy. The young man and his companion often would apart, and appeared to weep. They saw no cause. I saw no cause for their unhappiness, but I was deeply affected by it. If such lovely creatures were miserable, it was less strange that I, an imperfect and solitary being, should be wretched. Yet why were these gentle beings unhappy? They possessed a delight house, for which it was in my eyes, and every luxury. They had a fire to warm them when chill, and delicious viands when hungry. They were dressed in excellent clothes, and still more, they enjoyed one another's company and speech, interchanging each day looks of affection and kindness. What did their tears imply? Did they really express pain? I was at first unable to solve these questions, but perpetual attention and time explained to me many appearances, which were at first enigmatic. A considerable period elapsed before I discovered one of the causes of the uneasiness of this amiable family. It was poverty, and they suffered that evil in a very distressing degree. Their nourishment consisted entirely of the vegetables of their garden and the milk of one cow, which gave every little during the winter, when its masters could scarcely procure food to support it. They often, I believe, suffered the pangs of hunger very poignantly, especially the two young cottagers, for several times they placed food before the old man when they reserved none for themselves. This trait of kindness moved me sensibly. I had been accustomed during the night to steal a part of their store for my own consumption, but when I found that in doing so I inflicted pain on the cottagers, I abstained and satisfied myself with berries, nuts, and roots which I gathered from a neighboring wood. I discovered also another means through which I was enabled to assist their labors. I found that the youth spent a great part of each day in collecting wood for the family fire, and during the night I often took his tools, the use of which I quickly discovered, and brought home fire sufficient for the consumption of several days. I remember the first time I did this, the young woman, when she opened the door in the morning, appeared greatly astonished on seeing a great pile of wood on the outside. She uttered some words in a loud voice, and the youth joined her, and also expressed surprise. I observed with pleasure that he did not go to the forest that day, but spent in repairing the cottage and cultivating the garden. By degrees, I made a discovery of still greater moment. I found that these people possessed a method of communicating their experience and feelings to one another by articulate sounds. I perceived that the words they spoke sometimes produced pleasure or pain, smiles or sadness, and the minds and countenances, countenances of the hearers. This was indeed a godlike science, and I ardently desired to become acquainted with it. But I was baffled in every attempt I made for this purpose. Their pronunciation was quick, and the words they uttered not having any apparent connection with visible objects, I was unable to discover any clue by which I could unravel the mystery of their reference. Of their reference. My great application, however, in having remained. Hello, King Arthur. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well. We are currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So, if I do not perceive the chat very much, it is because I am currently reading. I am doing quite well, and thank you for the star. My great application, however, and after having remained during the space of several revolutions of the moon in my hovel, I discovered the names that were given to some of the most familiar objects of discourse. I learned and applied the words fire, milk, bread, and wood. I learned also the names of the cottagers themselves. The youth and his companion, each of them had each of them several names, but the old man had only one, which was father. The girl was called sister or Agatha, and the youth Felix, brother or son. I could not describe the delight I felt when I learned the ideas appropriate to each of these sounds, and was able to pronounce them. I distinguished several other words without being able as yet to understand or apply them, such as good, dearest, unhappy. I did eat well today. I did. I also had a snack break beforehand. I spent the winter in this manner. The gentle manners and beauty of the cottagers greatly endeared them to me. When they were unhappy, I felt depressed. When they rejoiced, I sympathized in their joys. I saw few human beings beside them, and if any other happened to enter the cottage, their harsh manners and rude gait only enhanced to me the superior accomplishments of my friends. The old man, I could perceive, often endeavored to encourage his children, as sometimes I found that he called them, to cast off their melancholy. He would talk in a cheerful accent, with an expression of goodness that bestowed pleasure even upon me. Agatha listened with respect, her eyes sometimes filled with tears, which she endeavored to wipe away unperceived, but I generally found that her countenance and tone were more cheerful after having listened to the exhortations of her father. It was not thus with Felix. He was always the saddest of the group, and even to my unpracticed senses, he appeared to have suffered more deeply than his friends. But if his countenance was more sorrowful, his voice was more cheerful than that of his sister, especially when he addressed the old man. I could mention innumerable instances which, although slight, marked the disposition of these amiable cottagers. In the midst of poverty and want, Felix carried with pleasure to his sister the first little white flower he peeped out from beneath the snowy ground. Early in the morning, before she had risen, he cleared away the snow that obstructed her path to the milk house, drew water from the well, and brought the wood from the outhouse, where, to his perpetual astonishment, he found his store always replenished by an by an invisible hand. Thank you for the heart and love. I appreciate you. Thank you. In the day I believed, he worked sometimes for a neighboring farmer, because he often went forth and did not return until dinner. He brought no wood with him. Other the times he worked in the garden, but, as there was little to do in the forest season, he read to the old man and Agatha. This reading had puzzled me extremely, at first, but by degrees I discovered that he uttered many of the same sounds when he read as when he talked. I conjectured, therefore, that he found on the paper signs for speech which he understood, and I ardently longed to comprehend these also. But how was that possible, when I did not even understand the sounds from which they stood as signs? I improved, however, sensibly in this science, but not sufficiently to follow up any kind of conversation, although I applied my whole mind to the endeavor. For I easily perceived that, although I eagerly longed to discover myself to the to the cottagers, I ought not to make the attempt until I had first become master of their language, which knowledge might enable me to make them overlook the deformity of my figure. For with this also the contrast perpetually presented to my eyes had made me acquainted. I had admired the perfect forms of my cottagers, their grace, beauty, and delicate complexions, but how was I terrified when I viewed myself in a transparent pool! At first I started back, unable to believe that it was indeed I who was reflected in the mirror. When I became fully convinced that I was in reality the monster that I am, I was filled with the bitterest sensations of despondence and mortification. Alas! I did not yet entirely know the fatal effects of this miserable deformity. As the sun became warmer, and the light of day longer, the snow vanished and I beheld the bare trees and the black earth. From this time Felix was more employed, and the heart-moving indications of impending famine disappeared. Their food, as I afterward found, was coarse, but it was wholesome, and they procured a sufficient of it. Several new kinds of plants sprang up in the garden, which they dressed, and these signs of comfort increased daily as the season advanced. The old man, leaning on his son, walked each day at noon when it did not rain, as I found it was called when the heavens poured forth its waters. Thank you so much, I appreciate it. This frequently took place, but a high wind quickly dried the earth, and the season became far more pleasant than it had been. My mood of life in my hovel was uniform. During the morning I attended the motions of the cottagers, and when they were dispersed in various occupations, I slept. The remainder of the day was spent in observing my friends. When they had retired to rest, if there was any moon, or the night was starlit, I went into the woods and collected my own food and fuel for the cottage. When I returned as often as it was necessary, I cleared their path from the snow, and performed those offices that I had seen done by Felix. I afterward found that these labors, performed by an invisible hand, greatly astonished them, and once or twice I heard them, on those occasions, utter the words "good spirit," "wonderful," but I did not then understand the signification of these terms. My thoughts now become more active, and I longed to discover the motives and feelings of these lovely creatures. I was inquisitive to know why Felix appeared so miserable, and Agatha so sad. I thought, wretched fool, that it might be in my power to restore happiness to these deserving people. When I slept or was absent, the forms of the venerable blind father, the gentle Agatha, and the excellent Felix flitted before me. I looked upon them as superior beings who would be the arbiters of my future destiny. I formed in my imagination 1,000 pictures of my presenting myself to them in the reception of me. I imagined that they would be disgusted until, by my gentle demeanor and reconciliating words, I should first win their favor, and afterward their love. These thoughts exhilarated me, and led me to apply with fresh ardor to the acquiring the art of language. My organs were indeed harsh, but supple, and although my voice was very unlike the soft music of their tones, yet I pronounced such words as I understood with tolerable ease. It was as the ass and the lap dog. Yet surely the gentle ass, whose intentions were affectionate, although his manners were rude, deserved better treatment than blows and execration. The pleasant showers and genial warmth of spring greatly altered the aspect of the earth. Men, before this change, seemed to have been hid in caves, dispersed themselves, and were employed in various arts of cultivation. The birds sang in more cheerful notes, and the leaves began to bud forth on the trees. Happy, happy earth, fit habitation for gods which so short a time before was bleak, damp, and unwholesome. My spirits were elevated by the enchanting appearance of nature. The past was blotted from my memory, the present was tranquil, and the future gilded by bright rays of hope and anticipations of joy. Chapter 13, Capítulo 13. Oh, goodness. Let me stretch once more for a moment. Ah, let me drink more water as well. I hope you're all doing well so far, by the way. Welcome back, welcome back. Nowhere is safe. Oh, goodness. Hello, Jules Berryman. Welcome on into stream for the first time. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your heavenly harmony and Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical subject artist. Welcome on in. We're currently reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Hopefully, here is a safe space. 134 pages in. We are very soon to reach almost 100 pages left. Interesting, huh? Actually, now that I look at it, we are technically almost to the middle of the book. Chapter 13, Capítulo 13. I now hasten the more moving part of my story. I shall relate events that impress me with feelings which, from what I had been, have made me what I am. Spring advanced rapidly. The weather became fine and the sky cloudless. It surprised me that what before was desert and gloomy should now bloom with the most beautiful flowers and verdure. My senses were gratified and refreshed by 1,000 scents of delight and 1,000 sights of beauty. It was on one of these days, where my cottagers periodically rested from labor. The old man played on his guitar, and the children listened to him, that I observed the countenance of feelings was melancholy beyond expression. He sighed frequently, and once his father paused in his music, and I conjectured by his manner that he inquired the cause of his son's sorrow. Felix replied in a cheerful accent, and the old man was recommencing his music when someone tapped at the door. Hello, Nanashi. Welcome on in. I hope you're doing well, and thank you for the star. Welcome in. We're just about to start. Just about to. We're currently starting chapter 13 in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. I see, I see. I hope that getting ready to work goes well then. It was a lady on horseback, accompanied by a countryman as a guide. The lady was dressed in a dark suit and covered with a thick black veil. Agatha asked the question which the stranger only replied by pronouncing, in a sweet accent, the name of Felix. Her voice was musical, but unlike that of either of my friends. On hearing this word, Felix came up hastily to the lady, who, when she saw him, threw up her veil, and I beheld a countenance of angelic beauty and expression. Her hair was a shining raven black, and curiously braided. Her eyes were dark, but gentle, although animated. Her features of irregular proportion, and her complexion wondrously fair, each cheek tinged with a lovely pink. Felix seemed ravished with delight when he saw her. Every trace of sorrow vanished from his face, and it instantly expressed a degree of ecstatic joy, of which I could hardly have believed it capable. His eyes sparkled as his cheek flushed with pleasure, and at that moment I thought him as beautiful as the stranger. She appeared affected by different feelings. Wiping a few tears from her lovely eyes, she held out her hand to Felix, who kissed it rapturously, and called her, as well as I could distinguish, his sweet Arabian. She did not appear to understand him, but smiled. He assisted her to dismount, and dismissing her guide, conducted her into the cottage. Some conversation took place between him and his father, and the young stranger knelt at the old man's feet, and would have kissed his hand, but he raised her and embraced her affectionately. I soon perceived that, although the stranger uttered articulate sounds and appeared to have a language of her own, she was neither understood by, nor herself understood the cottagers. They made many signs which I did not comprehend, but I saw that her presence diffused gladness through the cottage, dispelling their sorrows as the sun dissipates the morning mists. Felix, in particular, seemed peculiarly happy, and with smiles of delight welcomed his Arabian. Agatha, the sweet, gentle Agatha, kissed the hands of the lovely stranger, and, pointing to her brother, made signs which appeared to me mean that he had been sorrowful until she came. Some hours passed thus, and while they, with their countenance, expressed joy, the cause of which I did not comprehend. Presently I found that the frequent recurrence of some sound which the stranger repeated after him, that she was endeavoring to learn their language, and the idea instantly occurred to me that I should make use of the same instructions to the same end. The stranger learned about 20 words at the first lesson. Most of them, indeed, were those which I had before understood, but I profited by the others. Hello, Super Duck. Welcome on into stream for the first time. My name is Starry Muse. I'm your heavenly harmony. Oh, and Auditorium Floor Boss of the Elysian Tower. It's a pleasure to have you here as your musical subject goddess. Welcome on in. Ooh, right. As night came on, Agatha and the Arabian retired early. When they separated, Felix kissed the hand of the stranger and said, "Good night, sweet Safi." He sat up much longer, conversing with his father, and, by the frequent repetition of her name, I conjectured that their lovely guest was the subject of their conversation. I ardently desired to understand them, and bent every faculty toward that purpose, but found it utterly impossible. The next morning Felix went out into his work, and, after the usual occupations of Agatha were finished, the Arabian sat at the feet of the old man, and, taking his guitar, played some airs so entrancingly beautiful that they at once drew tears of sorrow and delight from my eyes. She sang, and her voice flowed in a rich cadence, swelling or dying away like a nightingale of the woods. When she had finished, she gave the guitar to Agatha, who at first declined it. She played a simple air, and her voice accompanied it in sweet accents, but unlike the wondrous strain of the stranger. The old man appeared enraptured, and said some words which Agatha endeavored to explain to Safi, by which he appeared to wish to express that she bestowed on him the greatest delight by her music. The days now passed as perceivable as before, but the sole alteration that joy had taken place of sadness in the countenance of my friends. Safi was always gay and happy. He and I improved rapidly in the knowledge of language, so that in 2 months I began to comprehend most of the words uttered by my protectors. In the meanwhile, also, the black ground was covered in herbage, and the green banks interspersed with innumerable flowers, sweet with the scent and the eyes, stars of pale radiance among the moonlight woods. The sun became warmer, the nights clear and balmy, and my nocturnal rambles were an extreme pleasure to me, although they were considerably shortened by the late setting and early rising of the sun, for I never ventured abroad during daylight, fearful of meeting with the same treatment I had formerly endured in the first language which I entered, for the first village which I entered. My days were spent in close attention that I might more speedily master the language, and I may boast that I improved more rapidly than the Arabian, who understood very little, and conversed in broken accents which I comprehend. Whilst I comprehended, I could imitate almost every word that was spoken. Not the creature flexing about his ability to be able to speak. Him boasting about being able to rapidly understand languages. I find that very funny. While I improved in speech, I also learned the science of letters as it was taught to the stranger. This opened before me a wild fields of wonder and delight. The book from which Felix instructed Safi was Volney's Ruins of Empires. I should not have understood the purport of this book had not Felix, in reading it, given every minute explanations. He had chosen this work, he said, because the declamatory style was framed in imitation of the Eastern authors. Through this work, I obtained a cursory knowledge of history and a view of the several empires at present existing in the world. It gave me an insight into the manners, governments, and religions of the different nations of the earth. I heard of the slothful Asiatics, of the stupendous genius and mental activity of the Grecians, of the wars and wonderful virtue of the early Romans, of their subsequent degenerating, of the decline of that mighty empire, of chivalry, Christianity, and kings. I heard of the discovery of the American hemisphere, and wept with Safi over the hapless fate of its original inhabitants. These wonderful narrations inspired me with strange feelings. Was man indeed at once so powerful, so virtuous and magnificent, yet so vicious and base? He appeared at one time as more scion of the evil principle, and at another as all that can be conceived of noble and godlike. To be a great and virtuous man appeared the highest honor that can befall a sensitive being. To the base and vicious, as many on record have been, appeared the lowest degradation, a condition more abject than that of the blind mole or harmless worm. For a long time I could not conceive how one man could go forth to murder his fellow, even when there were laws and governments. But when I heard details of vice and bloodshed, my wonder ceased, and I turned away with disgust and loathing. Every conversation of the carriages now opened new wonders to me. While I listened to the instructions which Felix bestowed upon the Arabian, the strange system of human society was explained to me. I heard of the division of property, of immense wealth and squalid poverty, of rank, descent, and noble blood. These words induced me to turn towards myself. I learned that the possessions most esteemed by your fellow creatures were high and unsullied descent united with riches. A man might be respected with only one of these advantages, but without either he was considered, except in every rare instances, as a vagabond and a slave, doomed to waste his powers for the profits of the chosen few. Hello, welcome on in, Rokyun. Welcome in, welcome in. I hope you're doing good. No worries. I hope that you sleep well, King Arthur. Thank you so much for stopping by, and I hope you have a lovely, lovely rest of your evening. Thank you so much for stopping by. Now, let's continue. Oh, great heavens. And what was I? Of my creation and creature I was also absolutely ignorant, but I knew that I possessed no money, no friends, no kind of property. I was, beside, endued with a figure hideously deformed and loathsome. I was not even of the same nature as man. I was more agile than they and could subsist upon coarser diet. I bore the extremes of heat and cold with less injury to my frame. My stature far exceeded theirs. When I looked around, I saw and heard of none like me. Was I then a monster, a blot upon the earth, from which all men fled and whom all men disowned? I cannot describe to you the agony that these reflections inflicted upon me. I tried to dispel them, but sorrow only increased with knowledge. Oh, that I had forever remained in my native wood, nor known, nor felt beyond the sensations of hunger, thirst, and heat. Of what a strange nature is knowledge! It clings to the mind. When it has once seized on it, like a lichen on the rock, I wished sometimes to shaken off all thought and feeling, but I learned that there was but one means to overcome the sensation of pain. That was death, a state which I feared yet did not understand. I admired virtue and good feelings. I loved the gentle manners and amiable qualities of my cottagers, but I was shut out from intercourse with them, except through means which I obtained by stealth. when I was unseen and unknown, and which rather increased than satisfied the desire I had of becoming one among my fellows. The gentle words of Agatha and the animated smiles of the charming Arabian were not for me. The mild exhortations of the old man, the lively conversation of the lovely Phoenix, were not for me. Miserable, unhappy wretch. Other lessons were Other lessons were impressed upon me even more deeply. I heard of the differences of sexes in the birth and growth of children, how the father doted on the smiles of the infant, and how the lively sallies of the older child, who all the life and cares of the mother were wrapped up in their precious charge. How the mind of youth expanded and gained knowledge of brother, sister, and all the various relations which bind one human being to another in mutual bonds. But where were my friends and relations? No father had watched my infant days. No mother had blessed me with smiles and caresses. Or if they had, all my past life was now a blot, a blind vacancy, in which I distinguished nothing from my earliest remembrance. I had been as then I From my earliest remembrance I have been as I then was in height and proportion. I had never yet seen a being resembling me, or who claimed any intercourse with me. What was I? The question again reoccurred, to be answered only with groans. I will soon explain what these feelings tended, but allow me now to return to the cottagers, whose story excited in me such various feelings of indignation, delight, and wonder, but which all terminated in additional love and reverence for my protectors. For so I loved, in an innocent, half painful self deceit, to call them. Hey, Chapter 14, Capítulo 14. Taking a small stretch again. Ooh, let me take a sip of water, super quick. Ooh, all right. I think we're good to go. It's 2:48 a.m. Not bad. We're currently going for 3 hours. Not bad. Not bad. We're in page 142. Oh wow. Not bad. Not bad. Oh goodness gracious. Sleep is catching up to me, but have so little left. Let me actually see how many pages I have left. I have in total 125 pages left. Not bad. Not bad. All right. Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. The name of the old man was De Lacy. He was descended from a good family in France, where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred in the service of his country, and Ragatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris, surrounded by friends and possessed of every enjoyment which virtue, refinement of intellect, or taste, accompanied by a moderate fortune, could afford. The father of Safi had been the cause of their ruin. He was a Turkish he was a Turkish merchant and had inhabited Paris for many years when, for some reason which I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople to join him. He was tried and condemned to death. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant. All Paris was indignant. All Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime alleged against him, had been the cause of his condemnation. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he heard the decision of the court. He made at that moment a solemn bow to deliver him, and then looked around for the means. After many to gain fruitless attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strangely grated window in an unguarded part of the building which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate Mahometan, who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night, and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favor. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavored to kindly the seal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Felix rejected his offers with contempt. Yet when he saw the lovely Safi, who was allowed to visit her father, and who, by her gestures, expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a creature which would fully reward his toil and hazard. The Turk quickly perceived the impression that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix, and endeavored to secure him more entirely on his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage, so soon as he should convey to a place of safety. Felix was too delicate to accept this offer, yet he looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consumption of his happiness. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the steel of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father, who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services toward her parent, and at the same time she deeply deplored her own fate. Let me organize myself a little bit. I have copies of these letters, where I found means during my residence in the hovel to procure the implements of writing. The letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Hello, Shash. Welcome in, and thank you for the head pat. I appreciate you. I hope you're doing well, love. Welcome in, welcome in. Right now, we're doing a bit of ASMR reading. Right now, I am reading Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you're doing well. Welcome in, welcome in. We are currently in page 144. We last time we left off at 76, and right now we are at 144. I'd say we're doing quite good. It's a very good book. I remember that I had this old book from my old school years, and I thought it would be a nice time to try to read it. As this, Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safi related that her mother was a Christian Arab? I'm not sure which term it is, seized and made a slave to the Turks. Recommended by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Safi, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. He instructed her daughter to the tenets of her religion, and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and an independence of spirit forbidden to the female familiars of Mahomet. This lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the minds of Safi, who sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia and being immersed within the walls of a harem, allowed only to occupy herself in infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of her soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and noble emulation of virtue. The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society was enchanting to her. Actually, let me get rid of the unfinished message. Let me get rid of the snack break one because we are no longer in a snack break. Ooh, my back is killing me. I'm also getting far more tired than usual. I want to try to at least finish this chapter before I eventually settle off for the evening at least. We've been going for 3 hours, and I think that's a pretty good number, honestly. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous to it, he quitted his prison and before morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plan to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house under the pretence of a journey, and concealed himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons, and across Mount Cenis to Langhorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favorable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safi resolved to remain with her father until the movement of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that he should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectation of that event. In the meantime, he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited toward him the simplest and dearest affection. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safi sang to them the divine airs of her native country. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm, for he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer if he should choose to betray him to the Italian state which they inhabited. They revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it might no longer necessary, be no longer necessary, and secretly to take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. The government of France was greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and Elysian and Agatha were thrown into prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasure. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon, while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her who he loved. The idea was. Let me read calmly. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon, while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her whom he loved. The idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favorable opportunity for escape before Felix could return to Italy, Safi should remain as a boarder at a convent at Leghorn, and then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself up to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free the lazy and Agatha by this proceeding. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile of their native country. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his had Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his family endured such unheard of oppression on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honor, and had quitted Italy with his daughter, insulting sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of the family. He could have endured poverty. He could have endured poverty, and while this distress have been the meed of his virtue, he gloried in it, but the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safi were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian now infused a new life into his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to prepare to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safi was outraged by this command. He attempted to expostulate with her father, but he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate. A few days after, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence at Leghorn had been divulged, that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had consequently hired a vessel to convoy him to Constantinople, for which city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant, to follow at her leisure with a great part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safi resolved in her own mind a plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike adverse to it. By some papers of her father, which fell into her hands, she heard of the exile of her lover and learned the name of the spot where he then resided. She hesitated some time, but at length he found her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her and a sum of money, he quitted Italy with a attendant, a native of Leghorn, but who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. He arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of the Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safi nursed her with the most devoted affection. The poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country, and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and, after her death, the woman of the house in which they lived took care that Safi should arrive in safety at the cottage of her lover. Okay. 148 pages out of 271 so far. I think that's pretty good so far. Hi, Brown Tool. Welcome on in, and thank you for the star. I hope you're doing well. Right now, I think I might call it here because of one thing. I've been going for 3 hours, and it is also 3 in the morning. So I am unfortunately feeling a little bit drowsy in my own kind of, little state of nature. I am feeling quite tired already. I have been reading for quite some time. Last time we were in 76 pages, and now we are at 148. So about we read about 72 pages, I would say. Not bad. Not bad. Almost close to the first pages that we had read in in the first day, in yesterday. Well, the day before yesterday now. For context, the the book itself has about, if I am correct, it has about 24 chapters. Yeah, I believe this has about, 24 chapters, and right now we go to we are technically about 9 chapters away from completing the book. Sort of, yeah. Like about 9 chapters. Not bad. Not bad. 9 chapters and only a couple of pages left. We left at 149. We have only 122 pages to finish. I think that's a pretty good number. Considering how much we managed to read today, we almost equally read the same. And that is not also counting. Yes, that is actually never mind. Yeah, that doesn't count the first 6 pages of the book because they were information about the preface, which I did not read. Which is fine because I wanted to read the prologue before we did read anything. The prologue started with 6 pages, so I'd say we are around the same number. But I think this was good. I will be posting this next part as well to my little VODs channel to make sure that it's all, over there. Making sure that folks are able to continue the reading of the story. Hopefully the volume is a little bit more louder for folks. And thank you all so much for stopping by. For those who stayed, thank you so much for coming in. And to those on IRIAM, thank you so much for coming into the performance. Thank you to Blanket, Haven, Quasar, Brown Tool, and those who might be looking in between, and those who might be having a sneak peek. And to those on Twitch, thank you so much for coming into the performance. To those who raided from June's side, thank you so much for stopping by. Your presence is always and truly appreciated. Of course, of course. Tomorrow, we hope to be finalizing the last few chapters of this book. So let's see if we are able to start at a much more earlier time so we have the time in order to fully read the book and we can finally finish Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. For our first ASMR book readings, you know, first three I would say. I think it's going quite well. And of course, thank you so much for stopping by and for sticking around for the very comfy reading. This is the quote unquote first of many recordings, so we hope that these for the future, this might not be the only ASMR that we do. Maybe you'll pick up some other ASMR things to try. Maybe we'll pick up some more specific things, some other books, or just generally have a nice time chatting. We'll have to see. But in the meantime, thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate each and every single one of you. And you are welcome in my auditorium at any time. May you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your evening. And I will catch all of my starlights tomorrow for another reading. Thank you so much for stopping by. Good night, good night.